In the midst of thousands of demons, only one surviving barbarian remains, who ends up paralyzed by a binding spell. He's afflicted with spells of silence and absolute weakness, leaving him unable to put up any defense. Right after, a terrible severing spell is cast to remove all his limbs in front of the enemy. To finish it, the high-ranking demons cast the terrible curse of instant defeat against him. An armored warrior calmly walks toward the barbarian's lifeless body on the ground. This powerful demon with horns and white hair watches the scene with a victorious smile on his face. The evil being starts to walk away, believing its mission is complete. But something unexpected begins to happen. In a completely startling way, the barbarian reappears right behind him, showing he's still very much alive. He reveals this was all possible thanks to a special contract he made directly with the angels. The archangel Seraph granted him the unique ability to understand and speak absolutely any language. A floating skeletal creature calls him Wolfgang and says he's a completely clueless, troubled individual. Wolfgang just listens to the enemy's insults while maintaining a serious and thoughtful expression. The monster questions how any sane human would dare declare war against beings as powerful as the demons. Paying no attention to the trash talk, the warrior pushes off and charges forward at full speed. He leaps with his giant weapon and ironically agrees with the floating skull's words. Wolfgang admits he lost his sanity a long time ago, thanks to the very demons who turned him into this. With over 60,000 monsters taken down, he remembers that the angels' blessings were extremely generous. The celestial beings gave him all the support he needed to continue his lonely war. He relentlessly cuts down every creature that crosses his path without showing a shred of mercy. A shadowy opponent orders him to give up, but the hero knows he has a much more valuable ace up his sleeve. Thanks to the fallen angel Uriel, he received the ability of regeneration and tells the demons to give up, even if he loses his limbs or even his head. Everything on his body instantly regenerates. With a frightening smile on his face, he promises to take that demon down with his bare hands. The fearless barbarian who refuses to be defeated begins to brutally overpower his enemies one by one. Faced with such ferocity, the invaders themselves begin to question the nature of that man. They no longer know who the real monster is. And now it's too late for regrets. More than 10,000 demons gather in a single temple to try to stop the warrior's unstoppable advance. That place was specifically designed to sever all his spiritual connection with the angels. He knew perfectly well it was a trap, but had no choice but to enter the location. His entire journey in this holy war was motivated by a single personal objective he must fulfill. He finally comes face to face with the demon responsible for cruelly taking out his entire family. The culprit was hiding right there in that dark temple, awaiting the barbarian's arrival. Luring the warrior into this ambush without his divine powers was the evil plan he orchestrated. Suddenly, an incessant rain of deadly arrows is fired toward the defenseless protagonist. Without his active regeneration, he's hit directly in the chest by several sharp projectiles. The demon's plan worked perfectly, leaving the warrior's body completely injured. Without the angel's blessing, the villain scoffs, saying he's nothing more than a simple, fragile human being. But the warrior just smiles and says his opponent talks too much and forgot a crucial detail. The demon leader becomes extremely furious at the taunt and calls him barbarian trash with great hatred. He immediately orders all his forces to advance and crush the invader without any mercy. Wolfgang says they should have done that from the beginning and reveals the second reason for his strength. He surpassed the absolute limits of humanity, becoming a warrior who evolves with every fight. With astounding speed, he begins to slice through the enemy army in the blink of an eye. His colossal strength is capable of wiping out an entire imperial army without any help. A devastating explosion sweeps through the area, leaving only the demon leader alive amidst the dust. The villain is in disbelief, seeing his entire army wiped off the map by a single man. Tired of hearing the same old excuses, Wolfgang points his blade to declare the end of it all. With his revenge finally complete, the hero plans to return in peace to his homeland in Germania. His goal now is to help rebuild the world that was ravaged by the cruelty of these creatures. He dreams of sailing the seas and hunting monsters, returning to a free life like the barbarian he once was. The fallen demon furiously says that his race would never be eradicated by the hands of a warrior like him. Right after, the monster itself plunges its claws into its chest to take its own life in front of its foe. Wolfgang questions if taking its own life makes it feel better, as it won't change the end of its race. He raises his colossal sword and shouts that he will never let the enemy escape his revenge by taking itself out. The demon reveals it has activated an ancient curse of absolute petrification to take them both down. A bright magic circle appears under the warrior, who is confused and doesn't understand what's happening. Wolfgang feels the magic's effect hitting his body rapidly, and his eyes widen as he realizes the danger. Several divine messages start to appear, revealing that even the angels themselves are surprised by this. The warrior realizes he has completely lost all hearing and any sense of touch throughout his body. His vision also begins to slowly darken as he uselessly begs his opponent not to run away. Amidst the darkness of his thoughts, the warrior vows revenge until a young man is suddenly startled. The boy admires the stone statue, thinking it looks incredible, without noticing the sculpture is alive on the inside. Wolfgang begins to regain consciousness and wonders how he can see that boy and hear his voice. A tour guide calls the boy back to the group, and he obeys, running to join the others. At that moment, the warrior's stone hand starts to move slightly, signaling the end of the curse. Suddenly, a gigantic, scary hand emerges from the statue and firmly grabs the young man's head. With an extremely serious look, the barbarian rudely tells the young man to get out of his way at once. Without any effort, the warrior simply throws the young man against the rocks of the cave. The boy falls unconscious to the ground, while the people around him panic and start screaming in horror. Wolfgang starts cracking his neck and shoulders to regain movement after being paralyzed for so long. He looks around, annoyed, and complains that the area is full of noisy and irritating humans. Free from the petrification, he decides his only goal now is to go after the darn demon that sealed him. To check his current situation, the warrior decides to summon his golden status screen before him. As soon as the screen opens, the barbarian's eyes widen in complete shock as he reads the new information. His surprised expression becomes even more evident as he tries to process the numbers he sees on the screen. The number of demons has risen drastically, and now new survivors called hunters are appearing. Wolfgang is completely confused by the word hunter. Having no idea what the term means, he also questions why, on his own class list, he remains the only surviving barbarian. While trying to make sense of these bizarre changes, he senses something approaching. 4 mysterious men in elegant suits appear around him, enveloped in a bright aura. 2 of those people run to help the fallen young man, and the barbarian finds the whole commotion ridiculous. He finds people extremely pathetic for fainting so easily and for making a scene over nothing. One of the men approaches and formally introduces himself as a guard from the first floor of that dungeon. He shows an official ID card and orders the barbarian to present his documents now. Wolfgang is confused about the document, and the guard warns that it's better to cooperate while he's being nice, with no patience for nonsense. The warrior extends his arm and grabs the man by the neck forcefully. He lifts the guard into the air with just one hand, leaving the other companions in complete despair. Wolfgang seriously warns that he's not the kind of creature that accepts being controlled by just anyone, while the guard chokes in the air. The others desperately beg the barbarian to stop. Suddenly, a young woman with red hair arrives, out of breath, and asks if he's the famous warrior Wolfgang. The hero lessens his grip while watching the newcomer with great suspicion. He approaches imposingly and demands to know immediately how that unknown girl knows his name. With his attention on the girl, the barbarian simply lets go of the guard's neck, who collapses to the ground. Wolfgang repeats the question intimidatingly, making the girl tremble with fear under so much pressure. She introduces herself as Kang Yeren and asks to talk somewhere else, but he sees no reason to agree. However, at that exact moment, Wolfgang's stomach growls very loudly, revealing his immense hunger. Noticing the situation, Kang Yeren smiles kindly and offers plenty of food and a good place to rest. Enticed by the offer, the barbarian decides to go with the redhead, and the two of them step through a bright magic portal. Coming out of the portal, he's shocked by the gigantic buildings and asks where exactly they are going. She explains that hunters are warriors trained to face monsters that emerge from magic portals. In the car, she says that dangerous, high-level demons are the government's responsibility, not the association's. Kang Yeren reveals he was part of a project to find new hunters, and the hero is surprised by this. She confesses that everyone thought he was just an ordinary statue until they discovered the truth about the seal. The redhead says that few powerful warriors can face demons, while the number of portals only increases. She reveals she had a brilliant idea as soon as she found the petrified barbarian in that dark dungeon. Wolfgang notices the girl suddenly stop talking and discreetly watches her, waiting for her to continue. The young redhead maintains a thoughtful and melancholic expression for a moment, leaving a silent mood. Soon after, the food is served, and the barbarian becomes extremely curious smelling that warm pizza. She presents the dish to him and tells him to eat as much as he wants, as she knows he must be starving. While he eats, she reports that she needed several healers to break that terrible dark magic. The warrior finds the food incredibly delicious and curses the creators for making something so tasty. Curious about the modern era's novelties, he points to a soda bottle. Wanting to know what it is, she explains it's a drink called cola and encourages him to try it with his slice of pizza. The barbarian tips the bottle to his mouth and drinks the mysterious liquid all at once with great thirst and enthusiasm. She asks expectantly if he liked the taste, but the warrior ends up having an unexpected reaction. He confesses he was startled by the fizz in his throat, but admits the drink is refreshing and very tasty, relieved to see he liked everything. The young redhead wipes away her nervous sweat and tells him to keep eating. Yeren takes the opportunity to ask if he's noticed that this era is very different from his own time. He confirms, saying the landscapes he saw from inside the car were completely strange to him. She explains that they are now in the 21st century and asks if he knows what year it was in his past. The barbarian looks confused and replies that he has no idea what that acronym means. The warrior then remembers that when he was born, 1,000 years had passed since Romulus founded the city of Rome. Hearing this, the girl slams the table and stands up excitedly. Celebrating that her theory was correct, she celebrates, deducing that Wolfgang came directly from the Middle Ages while they are in the 21st century. As she's an archaeologist hunter, she's extremely thrilled to be talking with someone from that era. Wolfgang doesn't care about her excitement and just asks for another box of that divine pizza. After devouring several pizzas in a row, the hungry warrior finally says he's feeling satisfied. He gets serious again and asks if she knows where he can find the demon that turned him to stone. Yeren is surprised by the unusual name, and he explains that this is the evil being responsible for sealing him. The redhead picks up her cell phone, and the barbarian finds the way modern people act very strange. The search on the app shows no results, and she asks if he's sure that's the real name. The hero confirms and explains that it was the last demonic enemy he was facing before the incident. With tears in his eyes, he says that after defeating the monster, he will return to Germania to be with his family. With a heavy heart, the young woman explains that he needs to face the harsh reality, as Germania no longer exists. Wolfgang is in absolute shock, to hear that his beloved homeland is now part of a country called Norway. He realizes that everything he knew and loved in the past now only belongs to old history books. Overcome by a sudden wave of frustration and pain, the warrior prepares a devastating punch. With all his strength, he unleashes his fury on the office wall, which begins to crack from top to bottom with the impact. With a dark and determined look, he whispers to himself that he still needs to rescue his beloved family. The girl gets worried and gently tries to remind him that his family passed away more than 1,000 years ago. He insists he can bring them back because of the contract with the angels and asks for help to find the demon. Understanding the situation, the young woman promises that if this demon is still active, she will definitely find it. Hearing the hunter's promise, the barbarian decides to make a mutual cooperation agreement with her from then on. He says he knows she was waiting for his awakening for some reason and promises to cooperate with her goals. The hero makes it clear that his only condition is that she uses all possible resources to track the villain. She warns that without citizenship, he needs to get an official hunter's license to be able to move freely through the country. She assures him he already has the necessary requirements, and the barbarian grumbles that modern life is too complicated. The redhead opens the car door and mentions there are many incredible advantages to becoming an official hunter. She mentions housing assistance and a monthly salary, making the warrior ask if the payment would be in cash. She says if he passes the test today, he'll earn a lot of money and maybe make a contract with the constellations. Wolfgang asks about the constellations, and the redhead explains that they are the guardian deities of the stars. She says that these beings favor talented people and give their full support to help them on their journeys. The hero says he knows angels, but has never heard of these entities that appeared only 15 years ago. Upon entering the place, he is surprised by the crowd of young adults who will be taking the promotion test today. The girl points to a colossal structure and asks if he sees that large wall up ahead. She explains that it's the wall of trials and that he needs to score 500 points to pass. The barbarian observes disdainfully, saying that the wall looks like it would break easily with a simple touch. Yeren guides him to the reception desk to register officially and give the warrior's name. Since he doesn't have a passport, she uses her own hunter's license to serve as a guarantee for the registration. A man dressed as a Spartan walks past them carrying a special spear, indicating the exam is about to begin. She says the spear needs to be placed in the structure to imbue the Great Wall with the divine power of Leonidas. The Spartan warrior inserts the weapon into the golden holder, releasing a strong electrical energy. A massive wave of golden light is channeled directly into the mysterious scriptures on that great wall. The bright portal fully activates, revealing a magical barrier of truly epic proportions. Amidst the candidates' commotion, Wolfgang thinks people are making a silly fuss over it. The evaluator asks for silence from everyone in the arena, excitedly announcing that the official tests are about to begin. Wolfgang suddenly narrows his eyes and becomes alert upon sensing a strong aura emanating from that structure. The great golden barrier emits a pulse of magical energy as everyone awaits the start of the tests. The evaluator asks for silence from the anxious audience, confirming that the selection of new talent is about to begin. Wolfgang narrows his eyes as he feels that strong magical aura and tries to decipher the origin of such power. At that moment, notices appear that the constellation Leonidas has found someone interesting and demands the test be quick. The crowd of candidates erupts, wondering who could have attracted the attention of such a strong deity. The announcer calls the first participant, who belongs to the renowned Blue Dragon family, named Go Yuna. She walks confidently as the crowd comments on her famous family of powerful hunters and swordsmen. Yuna displays an intense blue aura, showing she already has a temporary contract with a protective deity. The evaluators comment that she could end up becoming an official contractor if she puts on a good show today. Concentrating all her spiritual energy into her fist, the young woman prepares to deliver a devastating blow. She hits the great golden barrier head-on, causing a loud impact that echoes throughout the entire gym. The scoreboard glows, displaying the surprising mark of 1,254 points. Wolfgang asks if she did well, and the redhead explains that this score is worthy of an experienced professional hunter. Go-Yuna smiles smugly, thinking she is the special person the constellation Leonidas was looking for, but the system screen flashes with new messages from Leonidas, impatiently ordering them to send the next one. Yuna freezes in complete shock, realizing that the legendary deity wasn't interested in her. To make matters worse, her own supporting constellation ends its contract with her. Considering her too weak, unable to believe what just happened, she feels a sturdy hand rest on her shoulder. A muscular and arrogant young man tells her to get out of the way, mocking her frustration with a provocative smile. He scoffs at the girl, saying she should be grateful to have had even a temporary contract. The crowd buzzes excitedly about the presence of the young man named Kim Jin-woo, betting he is the real target. The system announces that the constellation descendant of the Barbarian has sent great power to strengthen Kim Jin-woo. Wreathed in flames of red energy, the arrogant young man confidently steps forward to deliver his physical attack. He shouts that no one else can be the protagonist here, and lands a violent punch against the great gate. The force of the impact generates a strong gust of wind that makes the evaluators hold on to avoid being blown away. The score climbs rapidly and surpasses the historic mark of 2,000 points, leaving the audience ecstatic. Kim Jin-woo smiles proudly, certain that his legendary score justifies the anxiety shown by the system. The instructors admit with surprise that this level of scoring is equivalent to that of veteran professional hunters. The young man turns to the barrier and proudly asks if Leonidas is satisfied with his demonstration. Suddenly, the young man's victorious expression vanishes, and his face turns completely pale under intense pressure. The barrier glows in reddish tones as Leonidas roars with anger, causing the young man to collapse to his knees, trembling with fear on the ground. He can't understand why the powerful deity is so furious with him. But at that moment, the constellation of the descendant of the Barbarian also abandons him, leaving the young man powerless. The system announces that Leonidas is seeking the legendary hero who eliminated thousands of demons in the past. The fallen young man screams in denial as Wolfgang walks heavily toward the golden barrier. The Barbarian stops right in front of the humiliated young man and tells him to get lost, as he is not the one being sought. The boy gets up furiously and shouts that it's not the old man's turn to take the test, and that he should wait. Wolfgang calmly advises him to disappear, while he's still being friendly and holding back. Feeling insulted, the young man aggressively grabs the Barbarian's arm, demanding respect. Wolfgang just ignores the physical contact, keeping his eyes focused exclusively on the shimmering portal. He gives a brief sideways glance toward the crowd, where Kang Yeren is watching him intently. The redhead girl shakes her head, silently pleading for him not to cause a scene. Understanding the signal from his new ally, the Barbarian sighs and decides to resolve the situation peacefully. The young man shouts disrespectfully at the Barbarian and demands that he apologize on his knees immediately. He pokes Wolfgang's chest and says that trash like him has no right to disrespect the strong. The young man continues to provoke, warning that if the deities get angry, people like him will be eliminated. Maintaining a calm posture, the Barbarian asks if they shouldn't hear the answer directly from the source. Wolfgang proclaims his name aloud, saying that any true warrior would remember his legend. Suddenly, a strong blue light begins to envelop the arrogant young man, leaving everyone in the arena perplexed. The gigantic spiritual entity of the descendant of the Barbarian appears and bows reverently before the hero. Kang Yeren watches the scene, trembling all over, and wonders if this is a direct manifestation with an extremely thunderous voice. The spiritual entity proclaims Wolfgang as the hero of the barbarians. Wolfgang asks if he was offended, and the spirit replies that the boy was foolish for not recognizing the hero. The deity humbly begs Wolfgang to forgive him, as the boy acted out of pure ignorance. The warrior accepts the apology, but points out that the young man abuses his power and deserves an exemplary punishment. The powerful deity agrees without hesitation, stating that punishing the arrogant boy was already its real intention. In an instant, a bolt of blue energy strikes the young man and throws him far away with great physical force. The residual energy spreads across the gym ceiling, generating a huge, stunning shockwave. Jin Wu collapses, knocked out, as the system announces the end of any divine contract with his family. Yeren is completely shocked to see a deity acting so submissively before that man. The barbarian's feet remain perfectly firm on the ground, as if nothing had happened there. Wolfgang walks to the barrier and calls out directly to the constellation Leonidas, challenging its presence. He shows a smirk and warns that he'll need to use a little of his strength, questioning if the wall can take it. Leonidas' spear begins to burn intensely, showing that the deity of Sparta accepts the challenge. The hero thanks him respectfully and confesses that he quite likes to see this kind of combat determination. Wolfgang warns that since the opponent has raised its energy, he will also show a bit of his real power. He releases an absurd amount of blue energy that cracks the floor and makes the entire arena tremble violently. The other candidates and evaluators hold on, scared, unable to withstand the tremendous air pressure. The strong wind generated by his power scares everyone as the divine energy consumes the entire environment. Yaren watches with her mouth agape, realizing this has gone completely beyond the level of a simple exam. She realizes with horror that Wolfgang is actually testing the resistance of the Greek deity itself. Under everyone's watchful eyes, the legendary spear of Leonidas begins to crack from the warrior's mere presence. Small cracks spread rapidly across the tip of the magic weapon, which starts to fail and lose its shine. The barbarian coldly advises the deity to give up soon, as he has no intention of losing. A colossal glow explodes from the hero's body, making the entire concrete building tremble with the immense impact. The young woman can barely stay on her feet against the strong wind and fears the students will faint from the pressure. She desperately realizes the situation has become extremely dangerous and hopes someone will stop it. To her total relief, all that absurd pressure and strong wind disappear instantly. She opens her eyes, confused, and wonders why the other people in the arena are acting so strangely. The warrior suddenly appears behind her and lightly touches her shoulder, calmly getting her attention. He coldly informs her that he's leaving because this whole ordeal has completely lost its meaning. Kang Yiren runs after him, not understanding why he wants to abandon the qualification test so suddenly. One of the students shouts at the instructor, but the man ignores him and runs, scared, toward the Great Wall. The man panics when he sees that the legendary sacred spear of Leonidas has been reduced to mere pieces of stone. He looks back, startled, as deep cracks begin to take over the entire sacred portal. In an instant, the magical barrier shatters, and the entire wall structure collapses into pieces on the arena floor. In the office, they watch the news about the collapse, and the barbarian says the wall was no match for him. The electronic panel flashes, calling service number 116 to the counter. Yaren tells him to stop drinking soda and calls him to go to the service counter. The association employee confirms the barbarian's name, who responds with a simple and direct kais. To issue the license, the man demands a 100 million won deposit for the destroyed wall and says the redhead can pay. Yaren turns completely pale and lets out a terrified scream. Upon hearing the absurd amount of the fine, she receives his F-level license while the man explains they were lucky not to be charged for the spear. Sitting on a bench, she hands him the document and says he has a huge debt of 90 million to pay. Wolfgang naively asks if that's a lot of money, and the girl despairs at having to pay it all. He questions if hunters don't earn well, and the redhead explains that only applies to high-rank warriors. She laments that archaeologist hunters like her depend on support, since they don't usually fight in dungeons. The barbarian isn't worried, and guarantees he can defeat hundreds of these weak monsters with a single punch. With a determined look, he asks where this dungeon is and demands that she guide him there immediately. She explains he'll need an agency to act as a hunter, and the hero compares it to the old guilds. She explains that the agency handles the spoils and dungeons, and the barbarian deduces they just charge a commission. Yeren says they charge 20 to 30%, but resolve disputes quickly and efficiently. When they try to enter the first agency, they are immediately rejected for not accepting foreigners. On the second try, they are rejected again because he didn't graduate from the official Hunter Academy. Another agency refuses to sign the contract, claiming he has no credit history in society. Wolfgang grumbles that people in this era talk too much, while the girl feels very guilty and exhausted while walking down the street. Yeren is suddenly startled to hear someone calling her from behind. Wolfgang asks why hunter agencies are so prejudiced and demanding with newcomers. She suggests he shave to look cleaner, but he says that won't change his fur coat. The barbarian states that his beard is his pride and reveals that his fur coat belongs to the Fenrir clan. Yeren despairs, saying pride doesn't help with bills, and asks him to at least change his look. A man in a suit approaches slyly, and the barbarian shouts irritably, wanting to know what he wants. The man smiles friendly and asks if they are looking for a good hunter agency. He introduces the famous MUA agency and proudly guarantees that they are the best in the market. Yeren stares at him with suspicion, knowing full well that company is famous for ripping off its hunters. The agent says he knows they were rejected and offers a promotional contract with low requirements. The girl sighs warily, aware that this agency acts like a mafia, and nobody wants to join them. The man proposes an abusive commission of 40% and a signing bonus of 20 million won. Yeren is outraged, realizing that it's practically a disguised slave contract, but the hero slams the table and demands a 100 million won bonus to sign that contract right away. Wolfgang says he needs this money for the fine, but the girl warns that signing it is dangerous. The shady agent agrees to the absurd amount, leaving both of them quite surprised by how easily he caved. As a condition, he demands the contract last 10 years with a commission of half of all profits earned. Out on the street, the girl scolds him for signing an abusive contract full of terrible clauses. The barbarian replies that he knows all about contracts and that his people have suffered greatly from divine agreements. Yeren puts her hand to her head, totally stressed, not understanding why he accepted the deal then. He explains that he always does everything to repay those who help him, as that is his barbarian philosophy of life. Wolfgang reinforces that the only thing she needs to do now is find the demon that destroyed his life. He says that if he takes out the villain, he can bring his whole family back, and that's all he desires most. Moved by the tragic story, she apologizes and says she's worried because he's from another historical era. The redhead smiles slightly and says her duty now is to help him in every way to adapt to this new world. The businessman interrupts the conversation to announce that the barbarian's room is ready and invites them to go there. In a group chat, a colleague of Yeren's asks if she saw the news about the destroyed temple. Lying in bed, she replies, confirming the incident, and her friends start celebrating this incredible achievement. She agrees about the historic feat but laments that she almost became a bankrupt debtor because of the barbarian. Her friends ask her to hand over the barbarian to them, but Yeren firmly refuses to do so. In the late afternoon, the businessman guides Wolfgang and Yeren to the lodging he prepared for the new contractor. The barbarian maintains his serious and imposing demeanor as he carefully analyzes every detail of the path. The young redhead watches him from a distance and begins to wonder if he will really be okay on his own. She lets out a worried sigh and thinks that she should have at least bought a few bottles of soda. The businessman opens the room door, and the warrior eagerly asks when he can start hunting in the dungeons. The man explains the weekly rules, saying he can go out 5 times, and 2 of them are mandatory. Wolfgang asks if he can go all 5 times at once, and the agent replies that there's no problem with that. The man explains that he will send departure notices via cell phone, and that he must show up at the designated location. The agent says goodbye, wishing him a good night's rest, and closes the door, leaving the warrior alone. Wolfgang looks around and finds the room small, comparing its size to an old dwarven inn. He sits on the bed and concludes that the place is comfortable, but realizes he needs to find the bathroom soon. With the room completely dark, he starts fumbling along the walls, looking for a torch to light it up. He remembers the girl mentioned a cell phone and looks for the rectangular object that emits its own light. The warrior finds a small card and is very confused, not knowing how to use this mysterious object. Wolfgang looks at the debit card in his hand, grumbling that this world is full of confusing things. He looks out the window at night, realizing it won't be easy to adapt to this new era. The next day, the businessman gathers the workers in front of the buses and asks if everyone has arrived. Wolfgang appears imposingly, wearing his fur clothes, and the foreman scoffs at his exaggerated look. The boss asks if he's the new guy and questions if he really plans to enter the dungeon dressed like that. The warrior gives the man a death glare, who is startled by such audacity and insolence from that stare. Yeren had asked him not to fight with anyone, and to promise he would never attack another person in that place. In his thoughts, the barbarian questions why he had to make such a peaceful promise to her. She explained that the world has changed, and that hunters need to act in mutual cooperation to survive. She reminded him that information networks are very advanced, and any slip up would spread quickly. Moreover, people today have a huge aversion to any kind of violence between humans. Yeren said that if he caused trouble, it would be much harder to track the demon he's so desperately looking for. He remembered his new ally shaking her head in disapproval, begging him to keep calm. Thinking about her advice, the barbarian decides to swallow his pride and avoid any unnecessary conflict. The team leader notices Wolfgang's stare and questions the rookie's audacity. With an intimidating tone, he warns that this isn't a movie and orders the rookie to put on a protective suit against the slimes. The boss points to his colossal sword, mocking the weapon and asking if it's a metal plate. He tells him to leave the weapon behind and orders him to take a bath, causing immense irritation in the barbarian. Wolfgang decides to cooperate and accepts the boss's orders, taking a deep breath so as not to lose control. But he simply starts taking off his pants in the middle of the street, leaving the foreman in a complete panic. Wolfgang asks where the nearest river is to take a bath, making the man scream in anger at his foolishness. Sometime later, the group travels in a truck towards the exact location of the dungeon entrance. A young man complains about the distance, but the driver tells him to shut up and be grateful for the great opportunity. The young man retorts that the place is too easy and that they just collect the remains of defeated monsters. He tells the boss he needs money fast to be able to pay the fee for his promotion exam registration. The man asks if he has the skill to pass and reminds him that this easy and safe job pays very well. The young man complains that his net salary is dropping a lot, but the irritated boss tells him to quit if he doesn't like it. The vehicle finally arrives at the dungeon base, with Wolfgang traveling isolated in the back of the truck bed. The businessman in the black suit receives the group with open arms, thanking the foreman for the long journey. The boss finds the presence of a high-level manager there strange, knowing it's the rookie's first day. The businessman asks how the new guy did, and the man says he'll find out soon and warns about an emergency. Seeing the barbarian in denim overalls, The businessman is extremely shocked and asks why he is dressed like that. Wolfgang explains they made him wear these weird denim clothes, but says they don't restrict his movements. The boss retorts that the problem isn't the movement, but the lack of protection against the acidic goo. The businessman defends himself, shouting that the rookie is so huge that none of the standard clothes fit him. The foreman says it's fine as long as he wears a gas mask and avoids touching the goo as much as possible. He begins the instructions, telling them to clear the first floor and ordering them to go get a special suit. The assistant worriedly questions if just a mask will be enough to protect him on the first level. The businessman guarantees the first floor only has remains but warns that the real danger begins on the second floor. He orders them to start from the beginning and seriously warns the Barbarian never to go down without proper protection. The group finally enters the dark portal with the clear mission of collecting all the slime remains. The young man teaches the rules to the rookie, telling him to be careful with the toxic gas exhaled by the slimes. Wolfgang curiously asks if there are many remains of these gooey creatures inside. He also asks about the number of special gallons available to transport all the material. The young man asks if he'll be okay carrying everything, as the heavy glass containers are quite difficult. Wolfgang carries the full weight on his back without effort, only lamenting that no more containers can fit. He admits he knows about slimes but says they are such insignificant creatures that he never needed to fight them. The young man finds the lack of remains strange until he spots one on the ground and says it's a good chance for the rookie to learn. He says slimes get hard after they're defeated and warns not to touch them without protection because of the poison. But the fearless warrior grabs the creature with his bare hand and calmly comments that the poison seems potent. The young man gets desperate and explains that his skin should melt upon touching the slime without protective gloves. But to everyone's surprise, Wolfgang's hand is perfectly intact. With no sign of injury, the boy's eyes widen under his helmet, unable to understand how he came out completely unharmed. Completely ignoring the warnings, the Barbarian continues to collect the monsters with his bare hands, as if it were nothing. He shows his intact fingers and guarantees they would never melt because of a creature as weak as this one. Next, he removes the gas mask, complaining that the accessory is extremely uncomfortable for fighting. The boy asks if he can breathe in there, and the Barbarian tells him to hurry up if he wants to earn money today. The young man remembers he needs to save a lot to pay the exam fee and decides to focus entirely on work. He's amazed by the warrior's sharp hearing, who tells him to shut up and keep moving quickly. Later, they reach the bottom of the first floor, and the boy notices there are almost no slime remains there. He reports that they would normally have filled 2 gallons by now and fears they'll end up losing money on the trip. Wolfgang suggests going down another level, but the young man warns it's too dangerous for too low-rank hunters. The Barbarian insists on going down, guaranteeing he will fill all the gallons, but the young man prefers to accept the loss. He reinforces that it's dangerous, especially since Wolfgang is without any protective gear in the dungeon. Despite the boy's great fear, the warrior says it's okay and continues down the dark stairs. The Barbarian comments that there's something strange in the air and that something very specific is bothering his senses. He reveals that he heard a noise from below and that he can feel the presence of a terrible demon. Meanwhile, at the association, Yeren tries to call him but hears a message that the number is not active. She finds it very strange because the agency had guaranteed they gave the rookie a functional work phone. The girl discovers that not even the association has a protective suit that fits his giant size. The manager says a new suit will take a week, and that the Barbarian will have to stop at the first floor. The businessman realizes he'll have to rush back to the dungeon to solve this problem with the new guy. Hearing this, the redhead intervenes, startled, and asks if the Barbarian was really sent to that location. She demands to know why his cell phone is off, if the agency guaranteed they had given him the device yesterday. Completely irritated, she yells at the man to take her immediately to the dungeon, where the hero is working. Meanwhile, on the second underground floor of the dungeon, large acidic drops of goo fall down the walls. The boy spots a live slime and screams desperately, warning that the active monsters have a lethal poison. But without showing any concern, the barbarian extends his bare hand and grabs the live creature with ease. He puts the monster in the gallon and comments with satisfaction that the second floor is much faster to work on. The boy gets extremely excited to see the first gallon full and celebrates that he now has money for the test. With all the gallons full, he suggests returning to the surface to get their payment for the day. The young man looks to the side and notices a mysterious opening in the floor that leads directly to the third level. He panics when he realizes the giant warrior has disappeared and probably went down to the next floor. The young man remembers with horror that the entrance to the third level is strictly forbidden for common hunters. The warning sign makes it clear that the area is restricted, and that invading a strong guild's territory is a certain end. The boy runs down the stairs, shouting for the rookie, and comes across a long tunnel filled with cocoons. He is shocked to find a huge glass structure containing the slime king that creates all the monsters. The young man explains that the mana injector next to it serves to keep that barrier active and trap the monster. Small gooey monsters continuously come out of metal pipes and fall onto a large conveyor belt below. He explains that the creatures naturally move up towards the upper floors because of the external light. He finally understands that the guild uses this secret structure to create monsters and profit from their remains. Suddenly, the barbarian narrows his eyes and warns that the airflow and pressure in the area have suddenly changed. The boy becomes extremely scared and confused, not understanding the reason for all that strange noise. Wolfgang calmly points upward, revealing that something very heavy is now falling towards them. A huge avalanche of rubble and dirt begins to descend through a duct directly into the glass tube. The experienced warrior watches the scene intrigued and deduces that they are feeding that giant slime. The boy confirms, saying that the monster feeds on all the trash that is thrown directly from the surface. The consumed organic waste makes the slime king produce new gooey creatures in an endless cycle. The young man is disgusted to notice that the guild makes a fortune feeding the monster with just scraps and trash. Suddenly, the golden system screen appears before him, announcing the detection and translation of a new language. The young man asks if he heard something again, and the warrior replies that it's actually something a little different. Suddenly, the young man notices an unusual greenish glow coming from behind and turns around, startled to see what it is. He screams in desperation when he sees that all the monsters that had left the room are coming back at the same time. A slime hits Wolfgang's face by surprise, covering his entire head with that green acidic goo. A true shower of gooey creatures falls on the warrior, and the boy screams in desperation, thinking the worst. Completely covered in acidic goo, the barbarian remains motionless in a calm pose of deep concentration. He hears a weak, whimpering voice coming from within the slime itself, desperately asking to be put out of its misery. The warrior narrows his eyes and is surprised to discover that this colossal creature can indeed communicate. In his mind, the creature repeatedly begs to be freed from that terrible, eternal suffering. Wolfgang promises to grant its wish if the creature answers where he can find the demon devil house. The monster sadly replies that it doesn't know the answer, and the warrior laments the fact with understanding. Back in the real world, the acidic goo continues to drip down his body, but his skin suffers no damage. The other hunters run to help him, startled to see that all his clothes have been melted away. Wolfgang tells everyone to be quiet and reveals that the Slime King is directly asking to be put down. The young man can't believe it, but the barbarian seriously confirms that this is the great monster's sincere wish. The young man warns that they are only F level, but the barbarian ignores him and asks if destroying the tube will finish the monster. The boy stutters a confirmation, but desperately warns that he has no right to break things in there. He begs them to leave because that place belongs to a large guild, and Wolfgang pretends to understand, but the next second, the warrior lands a violent punch on the glass tube, leaving the young man in total shock. He begs them to leave because that place belongs to a large guild, and Wolfgang pretends to understand. Wolfgang doesn't even listen and simply delivers a devastating blow, creating a huge crack in the glass. The young man steps in front and begs him to stop, asking how they will deal with the consequences of this invasion. Wolfgang just coldly orders the boy to get out of the way, stating he has an important promise to keep. The young man tries to argue, but the barbarian interrupts, warning that it's now too late for any conversation. The boy screams in desperation as he realizes the Slime King's magical barrier is collapsing and about to explode. At the same time, all the small gooey monsters around them begin to behave very strangely. Wolfgang orders the young man to flee immediately, while the boy refuses to leave him alone in danger. The hero repeats the warning that the tube will explode soon, and the boy flees, begging him to get out of there alive. Wolfgang just shows a confident expression and replies to himself that this worry is useless. The young man runs desperately towards the exit, shouting for the hero to survive the explosion at all costs. The barbarian watches the boy move away and then turns to face the great challenge that awaits him. In the next instant, the gigantic glass tube shatters completely in a violent, greenish explosion. A huge curtain of light and dust covers the entire central area of the dungeon, silencing the environment for a moment. Wolfgang stands firm against the immense amount of acidic energy that spreads throughout the stone hall. On the surface, the sun begins to set between the mountains, illuminating the entrance base of the slime dungeon. The businessman Kim Junwon arrives by car, bringing Kang Yerin, and is received with surprise by the team leader. Yerin anxiously asks about the hunters, and the man reports that they should have been out already, but haven't returned. Everyone looks worriedly towards the entrance of the place, fearing that something serious has happened inside. Suddenly, a strong tremor hits the ground, startling the birds and making the men lose their balance. Yerin feels the ground shake beneath her feet, and her eyes widen, worried about Wolfgang's safety. The employees duck down, scared, thinking it's a sudden earthquake. But they suspect the problem is something else. Luckily, the earth stops shaking shortly after, leaving the businessman still trembling and scared on the ground. The assistant says he will report the incident and go down to check on the situation of the rookie hunters. Worried about the barbarian, Yerin asks for a spare gas mask to accompany the search party into the dungeon. The Slime King telepathically begs to see the outside world one last time before its final end. He accepts the request, knowing the place is about to collapse entirely, and decides to carry the monster. The huge gooey creature wraps itself tightly around his body, and the barbarian finds the sensation bizarre. Gooey tentacles stretch throughout the hall, propelling the warrior towards the cave's exit. A massive wave of green, viscous energy erupts from the depths towards the mountain's surface. A colossal greenish explosion startles Yerin and the other hunters, who watch everything in great panic. Back on the second floor, the boy carrying the slime gallons is startled by a strong tremor in the cave. He drops the containers and flees desperately, shouting that the Slime King has managed to break free from its prison. The young man runs as fast as he can through the stone corridor, trying to save his life from that threat. He looks back in total panic as he realizes the gooey creatures are approaching quickly. The acidic slimes begin to jump and break the lamps on the walls, closing in on the fleeing young man. Right behind him, Wolfgang appears, running at high speed with the heavy containers tied to his back. With his colossal strength and agile legs, The barbarian speeds through the tunnel as the large green mass pursues him. The young man finally sees the light at the end of the tunnel and celebrates with relief, noticing the exit is very close. He cries with happiness, thinking he is completely safe and has managed to survive the tragedy. But his joy is short-lived when Wolfgang runs past him with a very focused and serious look. The barbarian simply grabs the young man's protective suit, and the boy fears he will be used as bait. But in reality, the warrior just picks him up and leaps towards the exit with astonishing agility. Both are thrown out of the dungeon, flying through the air towards the outer courtyard of the military base. The boy rolls awkwardly on the courtyard ground, but suffers no serious injuries from the fall. Wolfgang lands perfectly and turns with an imposing look, ready to face what comes next. Right behind him, the great torrent of green acidic goo explodes out of the tunnel, dirtying the entire courtyard. The gelatinous and viscous mass flows down the stairs and over the building's wall, creating a frightening scene. The high-ranking employees watch the scene, utterly horrified, unable to move. Yeren watches with her mouth agape at the immense amount of magical energy that has covered practically the entire area. The gigantic slime king rests on the building's structure, while the barbarian watches it patiently. The young man asks why he brought the creature outside if his initial mission was just to eliminate it. He explains that he made a deal and thought it was fair for the monster to see the sunlight once before its end. The young man looks at the barbarian with an expression of deep admiration and respect for that noble act. Wolfgang places a glowing purple energy core in the boy's hands, leaving him completely confused. He explains that it is the monster's heart, and that the creature will be finished as soon as the object is detonated. He also reveals that whoever detonates the core will receive a good portion of that legendary Slime King's power. The young man holds the glowing core with both hands and asks why the warrior is giving this to him. The hero says he doesn't need this power, and that it's a gift of gratitude, as barbarians always repay their debts. The boy is speechless and extremely moved by the immense generosity of that barbarian warrior. The great monster glows under the last rays of sun and telepathically thanks the hero for seeing the sky. Wolfgang calls out to the redhead from a distance and shouts, waving cheerfully, asking if she came to welcome him. He runs down the stairs excitedly, leaving the other guild executives completely stunned. The manager desperately calls headquarters, requesting dozens of trucks to collect all that goo. Yeren asks for permission to leave with him, and the manager agrees, as the accounting will take hours. He tries to squeeze into the back seat of the car, and the girl tells him to hurry up. In the car, she questions if he caused that accident, and the barbarian denies it, but she knows he's lying. Yeren tells the driver to speed up, while the hero calmly grumbles that he was just keeping a promise. She warns that they need to hurry because an important person has been anxiously waiting for him all day. Wolfgang's eyes widen with hope, wondering if they have finally found the villainous demon. Night falls on the military base, and the transport truck waits patiently in the now dark courtyard. The foreman asks if the manager isn't leaving, and the man says he needs to wait for the payment paperwork. The young man decides to leave first, knowing that the enormous amount of material will take a long time to be counted. Over the phone, Junwan confirms, impressed, that they managed to collect over 150 tons. In her luxurious office, the guild leader shouts furiously, finding it impossible to collect such a quantity. The leader Kang Mayan questions her brother if he would really pay over 1 billion won for this report. She loses her patience, arguing with her brother, and tells him to use his brain instead of just relying on his fame. Under his sister's stern orders, he is forced to go down into the dungeon again to investigate the situation. The manager complains about having to put up with his sister's temper, while the businessman asks about the payment. He sighs, upset, saying he'll have to work tedious overtime and inspect the slime dungeon. With no other option, The man laments his life as an ordinary employee and walks back to the underground tunnel. A modern shower starts spraying warm water with great pressure in the hero's inn. Wolfgang takes a shower, fascinated, and wonders what magic could be behind that water gushing from inside the house. He shouts, asking if they collect rainwater on the roof, and the girl just sighs, out of patience. She tells him to hurry up because she brought the largest clothes she could find and warns that an important person is waiting for him. The barbarian agrees and decides to get dressed in the clean, plain white shirt the young woman left for him. When he comes out, he puts on the funny, tight clothes and finds out he's going to meet the leader of the archaeologists. Since it's already late, she promises to buy clothes of the correct size and proper shoes the next day. Upon entering the leader's room, the barbarian immediately complains of hunger, and the girl promises to buy food if he behaves. Yorin formally introduces her giant guest to the elderly man who was eagerly awaiting that meeting. The experienced Dr. Choi Myung Jun turns with a serene look to greet the legendary hero from the past. The doctor introduces himself as a renowned B-level archaeologist, and the barbarian responds by citing his former tribe. Curious about modern terms, Wolfgang asks where the homeland of this archaeology tribe is located. Amused by the question, the elderly man explains that archaeology is a scientific study of the past, not a tribe. Understanding the explanation, the hero's stomach rumbles loudly, interrupting the conversation and demanding a good meal. Several boxes of crispy and tasty fried chicken are served on the coffee table to feed the hero. The redhead girl tells him to eat slowly, offering soda and promising to order more boxes if needed. Wolfgang chugs a gulp of soda and directly asks the elderly man the reason for the meeting. The doctor says he has some important questions, and the barbarian agrees to answer everything within his ability. The elderly man questions how a man from 1,000 years ago can speak the modern language so fluently. The warrior explains it's all thanks to the linguistic abilities granted to him by the blessing of the angels themselves. The elderly man is confused by the answer and asks if these angels are just the name of some constellation. Wolfgang returns the question, wanting to know what a constellation is. Remembering the incident at today's exam, he remembers that magical barrier, mentioning that these so-called constellations seem to be entities like Leonidas, or also like that giant warrior spirit that knelt before him submissively in the arena. The hero mockingly says that those weak creatures are what people today call constellations. He reports that angels are of a higher level, and that they visited his tribe in the past to ask for help. A moment later, the archaeologist begins to mentally organize all the facts revealed in that conversation. The elderly man summarizes that in the hero's era, angels and demons were at war, and the barbarians decided to join in, but the barbarians were taken down, leaving only Wolfgang, who sought revenge by waging a solitary war. He faced entire hordes until he came face to face with the enemy leader who orchestrated that whole disaster. The barbarian ended up falling into a terrible trap and was turned to stone by the demon's spell. Moved, Yeren holds the warrior's calloused hand and warmly assures him that they will find the villain. The hero looks away with a sad expression, remembering his family that was lost in that distant era. He takes a deep breath, trying to maintain control over his own painful emotions that have surfaced in his mind. The elderly man apologizes for the painful memory, but the hero says he needs to remember it to maintain his focus. The elderly scientist takes the opportunity to humbly ask the barbarian for one last and important favor. With a completely serious expression, Wolfgang grants the man permission, authorizing him to make the request. The elderly man says he needs to verify his historical authenticity to validate his discovery as a living relic. The barbarian gives a slight, ironic smile upon hearing he is considered a precious relic from humanity's past. The elderly man stands up excitedly and retrieves a mysterious object from his pocket. Under the watchful eyes of the two, he shows a small, shining Buddha statue that was created by the very constellation. He has a contract with. The elderly man explains that he just needs to summon this spirit for a second and asks if Wolfgang agrees to see it. The hero looks away hesitantly, not wanting to get involved with these weak constellation spirits again. But Yirin smiles warmly and pleads for his help, saying her academic career depends on this test. The barbarian sighs and looks at the redhead girl, his heart softening at the sincere request from his new friend. She assures him that the elderly man will help hunt the demon, and the hero ends up agreeing, making both very happy. The elderly man begins the summoning, and the small Buddha statue glows with an intense and warm divine energy. The enormous entity of the warrior Buddha appears in the room, bowing upon recognizing the legend before its eyes. The elderly archaeologist is perplexed as he reads the system message, revealing the hero's true historical importance. The Eastern deity pays its sincere respects to the barbarian for having put a definitive end to the Holy War. Wolfgang asks the elderly man to avoid formalities, revealing that for him, that war was only a half victory. The doctor apologizes, laughing awkwardly, as he confesses that his mana energy ran out quickly. In any case, he is happy to confirm Wolfgang's identity and sincerely thanks him for his time. Meanwhile, in the dark depths of the dungeon, someone walks slowly, investigating the wreckage of the place. The man is in total shock when he comes across the immense containment capsule, completely shattered on the floor. He trembles with fear, unable to imagine what kind of absurd force caused that catastrophic destruction. Over the phone, team leader Mayan screams furiously upon hearing that the Slime King has mysteriously disappeared. Her brother reports that the capsule was destroyed and that there are no more monsters on the third underground floor. She loses control and says that only an S-level hunter would be capable of breaking that protective barrier. The young man swears that only 2 F-level hunters entered in the morning, one of them a complete rookie in the association. She is intrigued to learn that this supposed mysterious rookie got his license just a day ago. Suspicious, the leader immediately orders an investigation into his life and to have the information sent over. She warns that she will sue the agency and reveal the culprit's identity to get evidence quickly. The brother asks for the pending 1 billion, and she furiously yells to send the employees away without paying anything. The next day, in a large city mall, the sunlight shines on the sale ads in the shop windows. Wolfgang and Yirin sit in a shoe store, and the barbarian calls the girl over to ask a serious question. He shows the debit card and asks, intrigued, why he can't use it to talk to people far away. She is completely perplexed to realize the barbarian has mistaken a bank card for a cell phone. He reports that he received another, larger rectangular object in his room, but decided not to bring it, thinking it was useless. With a sweat drop on her head, the young woman explains that he simply mixed up the uses of the 2 devices. The barbarian defends himself, saying no one taught him, and complains about the way the girl is staring at him. She just smirks and promises to teach him all about modern technology. As soon as they finish shopping, the store clerk finally approaches, apologizing for the delay in finding an ideal model. He shows the largest size available in the store, and is shocked to see the barbarian wears a size over 15. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the mall, someone holds a printed photo of Wolfgang, looking for him. A mysterious man in sunglasses watches the activity in the clothing store, trying to locate the hero. Yirin waits outside the dressing room, commenting that the new clothes seem to fit him perfectly. He comes out wearing an elegant brown coat and a gray beret, but the redhead thinks he looks like a grandpa. She adjusts the collar and suggests taking off the hat, complimenting that he now looks like a modern pro wrestler. They leave, carrying shopping bags, and the girl advises him to always be well dressed from now on. The barbarian grumbles about the complexity of modern times, and Yirin asks for a minute to run to the restroom. 2 suspicious men in hoods and glasses approach Wolfgang, planning to catch him by surprise in the hallway. Wolfgang is very confused in front of the restrooms, not understanding why there are two different doors. Suddenly, a system signal appears behind him, indicating that a quick dash ability has been activated. A young man in a white hood runs past at high speed and tries to snatch one of his shopping bags, but the hero doesn't even move, and the thief ends up being thrown far away by the impact of his own pull. The second goon advances with his fists on fire, throwing an imposing punch aimed right at the hero, but Wolfgang extends his hand with extreme ease to stop and completely nullify the man's attack. He grabs the top of the muscular opponent's head in mid-air with just one hand in a humiliating way. Wolfgang reveals he knew he was being followed by them all day and demands to know who sent them. Even captured, the trembling goon asks if he is Wolfgang and orders him to come along quietly. Annoyed, the barbarian tightens his fingers, crushing the glasses and making the opponent scream in pain from the pressure. The man despairs, screaming for help, seeing that the strength of this level hunter is truly insane. Ignoring the screams, Wolfgang repeats his initial question, wanting to know if they belong to the Songshan Guild. In the restroom, Yiren washes her hands, commenting to herself that the barbarian is a lot of work to take care of. She worries that he doesn't know how to use the restroom and regrets not being able to go in with him to help. He throws the goon to the ground and gives a clear warning that if this happens again, he will wipe their guild off the map. Totally injured and scared, the two goons run away as fast as they can from that place. Yiren finally comes out of the restroom and finds the destroyed sunglasses lying on the hallway floor. He plays it cool and suggests they go eat, while she promises to teach him how to use the cell phone at her residence. The two walk together, and she asks what he wants to eat, promising to spend all the money on the doctor's card. That morning, the Songshan Guild files $1 million lawsuit against them due to the incident in the dungeon. The businessman drinks his beverage, grumbling that blaming rookie level hunters for this is completely absurd. They debate the ridiculous demand for compensation, while the guild tries to avoid paying the fees it owes. The director demands absolute confirmation that the hunters sent there were indeed only of the lowest level. The businessman states that he has a lot of market experience and has worked as a professional hunter in the past. They decide to analyze the camera footage sent as evidence for the lawsuit by the guild to support the accusation. The security recording shows Wolfgang neutralizing the two assailants brutally and without any effort. The director points to the young man in the hut in the video, explaining that he is a skilled, high-level hunter. The second opponent was also a strong professional, and even catching the barbarian by surprise. They were humiliated. He reports that the guild demands to know who is funding them, accusing the agency of hiding the barbarian's true level. Junwan is outraged by the boss's doubts and threatens to go to the guild personally to settle the score over that slander. The director advises him to stay calm and suggests suing them back to recover the money owed to the company. He agrees and says he needs to go to Cheongdam to meet a talented rookie to close an excellent contract. Junwan rushes into a golden taxi and asks the driver to take him quickly to the destination neighborhood. He curses the corrupt guild leaders in his thoughts, while lamenting not having money for his own car. But as he scrolls through his cell phone, the businessman suddenly spots something surprising and his eyes widen. He analyzes the video and is shocked to notice that the powerless barbarian stopped an attack from a D level without even blinking. Observing the man's imposing presence in the video, the businessman begins to devise an audacious plan in his mind. He decides to test the barbarian's strength personally to find out if he really is the monster he appears to be. A few days later, the imposing barbarian walks calmly across the crosswalk with his colossal sword. The hero finds the traffic rules ridiculous, grumbling that the king of this world oppresses his own people too much. He stares at the traffic lights, trying to remember the instructions he received so as not to get lost in the big city. From a distance, the redhead spots his giant silhouette at the intersection and waves cheerfully to get his attention. They enter the building, and the girl informs him that the doctor is already eagerly awaiting their arrival. Yaren opens the entrance door with enthusiasm, and the elderly man turns with a smile to welcome the group. The archaeologist thanks them for the visit and invites them to go directly to the laboratory's storage room. The elderly man is fascinated as he touches the hero's colossal blade, leaving the barbarian extremely confused. With a smile, the girl explains that this curious behavior is normal for him as a history lover. Wolfgang hands over the precious fur cloak for study, and the elderly man's eyes widen upon hearing the creature's name. They enter the immense relic depot, filled with dark metal shelves and important files. The elderly man introduces the barbarian to his assistants, and the young people are impressed to see the hero in person. The red-haired researcher with her hair tied up stares at him up close, completely astonished by his absurd physique. She extends her hand with a smile, introducing herself as Kang Jiho, a high-level official archaeologist from the association. The hero returns the greeting seriously, proudly repeating his name and warrior lineage. She introduces her smiling assistant, Jung Ian, who greets the group's new ally very kindly. Yaren appears from behind the barbarian, and the two friends celebrate their reunion with hugs and laughter in the laboratory. The assistant touches the hero's colossal blade, his eyes shining, completely fascinated by the weapon's details. The barbarian explains that his weapon is a sacred heirloom of his tribe, and the elderly man claps his hands with excitement. Jiho says they arrived at the perfect time to help them decipher a mysterious object from the depot. The hero whispers to the redhead, asking if these scholars are always this agitated about relics. The barbarian's eyes widen when he sees the colossal stone hammer that was rescued along with him from the dungeon. She asks if he recognizes the object, explaining that the relic has rejected all of the scientists' analyses. Wolfgang clearly remembers his friend Jonas's hand holding the handle of that weapon firmly in the distant past. He reports with regret that Jonas was the bravest warrior of his old tribe, and also his best friend. His best friend fought bravely against the invading hordes and ended up having a glorious end in combat. That weapon belonged to him and became the battle hammer the barbarian used to honor his memory. Wolfgang wielded his fallen friend's hammer across the battlefield, eliminating thousands of demons. Yaren watches the hero with deep admiration upon hearing the emotional story of friendship behind the relic. The barbarian stares at the hammer with shining eyes and vows that he will find the demon that took his friend's life. Yaren holds Wolfgang's hand warmly, asking him not to try to carry that whole burden alone. She smiles and reminds him that now he has allies by his side, ready to help him solve everything together. Wolfgang sincerely thanks her for the support, feeling a little more relieved by that promise. Jiho apologizes for stirring up painful memories, but the hero reassures her, saying it was good to find the weapon. He asks if he helped with her research, and the young woman replies, extremely excited about the great discovery. Suddenly, the barbarian's eyes widen, and he interrupts the conversation upon feeling a strange signal in the environment. Wolfgang points his hand, revealing a small, shining triangular metal fragment that has appeared in the air. The warrior clenches his fist tightly, causing an immense discharge of electrical energy to crackle between his fingers. Jiho screams in panic, warning that there's an anti-theft system on the relic, and it cannot be removed from there. The redhead asks, startled, the reason for that sudden action, while the hero stares at the object, intrigued. To everyone's surprise, the barbarian throws a punch against the blue barrier, destroying the magical protection. Wolfgang shouts imposingly, focusing all his strength to break through that divine security for good. He remembers the demon's sharp arrows that hit him before he was completely turned to stone. He remembers the giant wolf and the terrible confrontation against the enemy army in the depths of the Dark Temple. The barbarian recalls his mortal hatred for the demons, channeling all his power into that single blow. His calloused hand glows intensely with the energy of fury accumulated over more than 1,000 years of being sealed. He narrows his eyes, focused on revenge, and vows to destroy his arch-enemy at any cost. Yeren looks fascinated at the vial containing the arrowhead with a strange dark stain stuck to it. The barbarian confirms that the stain is his own blessed blood, with the powerful sacred energy of the angels. Geo confirms that the trace of dark magic remaining on the arrowhead does indeed belong to the wanted demon. The scientist scolds him for the reckless act, and Wolfgang apologizes for losing control of his emotions. She smiles understandingly, saying that thanks to that craziness, they obtained a very valuable result. She reveals that she already imagined the great hammer was a relic, but never suspected the arrowhead. Jiho comments that if they had hired a demon hunter before, the research would have been much easier. She explains that distinguishing magic from sacred energy is difficult even for her, an experienced A-level hunter. The barbarian says he learned to recognize the trail naturally after facing tens of thousands of demons. The elderly man shouts furiously, complaining that the association always denied his requests for a demon hunter. The researcher turns to the elderly man and shyly asks if her suspicions were wrong all along. She stares at the barbarian thoughtfully, reflecting on his enormous potential to become this special hunter. Noticing her sister's sudden silence, Yeren asks what's going on, making the mood in the room tense. Jiho surprises the group by suggesting that Wolfgang officially become a registered demon hunter. She remembers the deal made with the elderly man to investigate the whereabouts of the demon that turned him to stone. She reveals that even though they are A-level, common archaeologists only have access to already discovered relics. Yeren agrees with a smile, confirming that only demon hunters have full access to that database. She says the class is extremely rare, but with his immense strength, the qualification test will be very simple. Interested in the tracking proposal, the hero asks what he needs to do to obtain this rare license. Jiho says it's simple, and that he just needs to be approved in the association's official promotion test. But upon hearing this, Yeren collapses with her head on the table, leaving her sister quite surprised by her tragic reaction. Wolfgang asks, intrigued, the reason for her despair, and the young woman reveals that the test has been postponed indefinitely. The assistant says that the legendary spear of Leonidas was mysteriously destroyed during the promotion tests. She deeply regrets it, saying that without the promotion exam, it's impossible to get a demon hunter license. Jiho observes the barbarian with a thoughtful expression and says that fortunately, there is still an alternative path. Wolfgang and Yeren lift their heads with great surprise and curiosity upon hearing there's a second option. The assistant chimes in and confirms that there is another legal qualification method besides the official exam. With a smile on his face, he reveals that the solution is simple and they just need to enroll the barbarian in the academy. The hero listens attentively to that unusual idea, pondering if this would be the best alternative for him. He explains that because it's a very rare class, he can get the certificate by studying at the educational institution. Yeren questions if the school isn't full of children, but her sister assures her there are many young adults there. Curious about the barbarian's historical facts, Jiho asks what his real age was before being sealed. The warrior proudly reveals that the 4 seasons of the year have passed 33 times since his birth. Everyone is in absolute shock to hear that he is only 33 years old. Yeren explains that this is a Korean term used to call an older sister or female friend. Understanding the local custom, Wolfgang decides to agree and politely calls her Jiho Nuna. But Jiho gets annoyed instantly and shouts, telling him not to call her that with that old-looking face. Meanwhile, in the hallway, the businessman says he will send the dungeon schedules by message. Junwon walks tiredly, planning to pick up the new contractor from the courtyard for today's work. He suddenly stops walking when he notices a strange commotion outside the lodging. Junwon looks at the identification plate on the door of the new hunter's room. 305. He recalls the terrible incident with the acidic goo in the underground courtyard of that dungeon. Junwon focuses back on the video of the barbarian fighting insanely in the establishment's hallway. The businessman concludes that he is not a simple F level and that he needs to test his strength personally. He plans to come up with some excuse to provoke the warrior and exchange at least a single blow. Walking down the street, Yeren explains she can help him with the recommendations for academy admission. She says Jiho will pay the contract-breaking fine, and the barbarian decides to leave everything in her hands. Junwon watches them from a distance as the barbarian agrees to transfer to Jiho's guild in the future. Yeren laments that the only obstacle now is the tuition fee, and he realizes the problem is money. The hero grumbles that this modern era is a type of society where no one can do anything without gold. Junwon suddenly appears and generously offers to pay Wolfgang's school admission fee, but with the clear condition that the warrior does a small favor for him in immediate return. Wolfgang questions if he really wants to take a punch with all his strength and advises him to give up on it. The businessman says he's a C-level hunter and guarantees he would never go down from a punch by a mere F level. Yaren looks at him with great suspicion, thinking the man seems too weak to be of that level. Noticing her doubt, he laughs confidently and warns that it's a grave mistake to judge people by their physical appearance. Junwon displays his sacred medallion, revealing that his powers can rival even an A-level hunter. The girl is completely suspicious of that bold statement, thinking he's bluffing to impress. But then she starts to wonder if he hides his real extraordinary abilities for some secret reason. She stares at the artifact in his hand, imagining it to be a relic connected to the constellation he has a contract with. Yeren seriously warns the barbarian to be cautious, as the opponent's medallion is indeed a sacred relic. Wolfgang agrees, saying that barbarians don't refuse challenges, and assumes the medallion will withstand the impact. He smiles challengingly, confessing he's curious to test the resistance of that medallion's mystical power. He readies his closed fist and orders the redhead to move away so she won't be hit by the shockwave. The hero focuses his piercing and merciless gaze on the target, ready to deliver a truly colossal blow. He orders the opponent to summon his supporting constellation before being hit by the physical attack. The businessman smiles with total confidence and prepares to receive the punch. Accepting the start of the combat, he raises the bronze medallion, and the system announces that the sacred spirit has answered Junwon's call. A strong current of blue air begins to spin intensely around the sacred artifact in his hand. The system issues a direct spiritual possession alert, leaving Yeren shocked by the dangerous situation. She panics when she sees the deity has taken control of the man's body in a frightening way. A glowing silhouette of an ancient dynasty official imposingly overlaps the businessman's body. Junwon's appearance completely changes to that of an elegant ancient royal inspector with his fan and hat. Yeren tries to figure out the identity of that mysterious and imposing deity that has taken over the fight. She realizes it's the legendary royal inspector Park Mun-soo, very famous in traditional history. Several ghostly warriors appear around the hero, ordering everyone to make way in the arena. Dozens of ancient soldiers position themselves in a disciplined manner right in front of the fearless barbarian. Wolfgang looks at them seriously and asks if he should strike all the opponents at once. The inspector calmly replies that he summoned them only to accumulate sacred energy for his defense. He warns that the strength of his defense increases against evil people and that the barbarian won't suffer if he is pure. Wolfgang just replies that he understood and begins to tense his muscles to deliver his attack. In the blink of an eye, The barbarian lands an incredibly violent and demolishing punch against the opponent's chest. The spiritual projection starts to crack, and the inspector himself cries out in complete panic upon realizing his defeat. Wolfgang calms down after delivering the devastating blow and asks if that demonstration is enough. The imposing spiritual entity of the royal inspector slowly dissipates from the businessman's body. Yeren is lost among so many ghostly soldiers. Complaining that she can't see anything at all, she tries to see through the dust, anxious to find out the final result of that violent test. The army of spirits suddenly disappears, leaving the young redhead completely confused in the middle of the street. She walks hurriedly and spots the businessmen passed out on the ground. Realizing the dispute is already over, worried, she asks if the barbarian was injured, and he just calmly replies that he's perfectly fine. Wolfgang says he's more worried about the opponent, and the girl despairs, fearing the man might have passed on. Kim Junwon coughs weakly on the ground, lamenting that things didn't go exactly as he had planned. The hero confirms he's alive and asks if his academy tuition fee has been paid off with this. Yeren confirms the bonus is paid and orders him to show up at the academy entrance on Monday morning. She repeats the warning several times, demanding that he not forget the important appointment under any circumstances. Junwon gets up, sore, and sighs with relief, noticing he feels no evil energy coming from the hero. He stares at his own hands, perplexed by the colossal strength of that warrior who broke his spiritual defense. The C-level businessman still can't believe he took such a devastating blow from a rookie F-level hunter. He watches the hero's silhouette move away under the setting sun, wondering what his real identity might be. The businessman wonders intrigued if Wolfgang might be a constellation or even a much higher being. Elsewhere, the arrogant young Kim Jin-woo stretches his arm, showing off his immense strength and his marked tattoo. Before him, the concrete wall of the training center is deeply damaged by his violent blows. The boy clenches his fist, which glows with an intense blue flame, demonstrating his great combat determination. Seized by fury, he quickly advances, delivering another blow at full speed to test his power. The punch collides with brutal force against the target, further destroying the structure with an immense shockwave. Jin-woo breathes heavily and tiredly after releasing all his stress in that exhausting workout. Suddenly, the electronic screen of the testing center glows, revealing the numbers of his newly achieved score. He cheers upon noticing he reached the mark of 2,127 points and is still evolving quickly. A few days later, in the morning, an immense staircase surrounded by green trees appears as the entrance to the academy. Yeren runs up the steps and tells the businessman Junwon to hurry up while the man drags himself along. Exhausted, she mocks the man, saying that pretending to be tired won't get him out of paying the school fees he owes. Junwon complains that it's not out of stinginess, but because of the severe side effects of spiritual possession. Thanks to the incident of the relic's destruction, the registration period at the renowned academy was extended. In the office, the director evaluates Wolfgang's paperwork and says his enrollment can be approved the same day. The employee hands over the paperwork and says that because he's F-level, he will be temporarily assigned to Class F. Yeren smiles with relief, realizing that, ironically, they got the spot thanks to the wall Wolfgang destroyed. She takes the opportunity to ask if the school issues licenses for rare classes, and the man is surprised by the topic. The director confirms the possibility, revealing that the experienced professor Kim Song-chil handles that area. Yeren keeps the professor's name in her mind, aware that he will be a key piece for Wolfgang's future. The director says he is the tutor for Class F, and invites the new student to accompany him to the classroom immediately. The director mixes up their ages and calls Wolfgang the girl's father, leaving Yeren completely astonished by the mistake. She laughs nervously and corrects the man, explaining that the real student there is the giant hero by her side. The director gets embarrassed and tries to apologize for the misunderstanding. But the girl keeps laughing at the confusion. She tries to change the subject, asking to whom she should give the money for the school tuition payment. She notices the silhouette of someone arriving in the courtyard and says that person will take care of the details. The businessman finally arrives, exhausted, and grumbles angrily about the school being built on top of a hill. In the courtyard, the tutor asks about Wolfgang's weapons, and the barbarian replies that he used to wield a longsword. Yeren questions if weapons are really necessary, and the professor confirms that everyone needs to participate in training. Yeren regrets having handed over the relic, but Wolfgang says he doesn't mind and can use it at any time. She looks at him, intrigued, not understanding how he could use a sword that is locked in the school's storage. Suddenly, a blur at high speed rushes past them and down the adjacent hallway at an insane speed. The young redhead dodges, startled by the strong wind generated by that person, and complains about the dangerous situation. The tutor points in surprise, identifying the silhouette of that agile man as Kim Song-chil himself. The mysterious, agile man stops in his tracks upon hearing someone calling him so loudly. He turns calmly, floating in the air with a serene expression, and asks if someone indeed called him. The tutor asks him to guide the new demon hunter candidate, and the professor is surprised by the news. The tutor points to the floating professor and says the barbarian can accompany him to the classroom immediately. It's time for Yeren to say goodbye to Wolfgang, and she asks worriedly if he'll really be okay alone. She instructs him to use his cell phone in any emergency and seriously begs him never to hit anyone. Yeren looks him closely in the eye and reinforces the warning that he cannot cause trouble inside the school. Without showing concern, the barbarian just turns his back and starts walking towards his tutor. The redhead watches him leave with a melancholic expression, silently hoping that everything goes well. Junwon mocks her, saying it looks like she's sending her son off to the army, and the girl shouts, annoyed. The tutor gets everything mixed up again, calling them her children, and Yeren yells furiously, denying the relationship. Later, she walks through the school and comes across a large hallway of photos, looking like a hall of honor. Junwon explains that the best graduating students from each class of that famous institution are displayed there. He proudly points to Kim Jin Sung's photo, revealing he was the top student of his time. The businessman praises his unbeatable strength, remembering that he belongs to one of the most influential families in the country. He respectfully states that Jin Song gave up an easy life because he was a truly remarkable young hunter. Yeren remembers him with excitement, but Junwon reveals that he suffered from the immense pressure of his arrogant father. The young redhead stares at the photo panel with a melancholic look, imagining the sad dramas of that wealthy family. The businessman smiles discontentedly, commenting that the young man was forced to follow the dream imposed by his own father. Yeren finds it strange that he knows so many details, and Junwon jokingly says he loves to research other people's lives. The academy tutor returns to the photo hallway, politely thanking the two for their patience in waiting. The employee confirms if Junwon indeed recommended Wolfgang for the agency's scholarship program. The businessman smiles slyly, wanting to secure a full waiver of the hero's school fees using the bonus. Yeren understands the financial move, and the man jokes that if he had money, he would have bought his car. The employee asks him to come into the room to sign the extra documents required to formalize the scholarship. Junwon tells her to hurry up and sign the paperwork, promising not to leave her without a ride back from the mall. The girl is internally grateful for the payment but admits it's still very hard to like that businessman. She decides to push those thoughts aside, focusing only on hoping that everything goes well on the first day of school. But a nagging thought bothers her, as she knows the hunter Kim Jin Song was extremely famous. She seriously wonders what could have been the reason for that prodigy's sudden disappearance lately. At the other counter, The attendant says it's registration period and asks the young Jin, Woo, to sit and wait. Junwon passes through the same hallway to handle the paperwork, not paying much attention to the young man waiting there. But with a sideways glance, the businessman feels he's seen that blue-haired boy's face somewhere before. His eyes widen in complete shock as he finally recognizes the identity of the young man in the gray sweatshirt. Completely perplexed, he points his finger and shouts, getting Kim Jin, Woo's attention in the service courtyard. When called, he turns seriously, and Junwon shouts his real name, demanding to know what he's doing at the academy. Yarin hears the shout from a distance and remembers that Jin Song was the legendary elite here who had the family bonus. She stares at his image on the panel, trying to process how such a famous prodigy ended up right there. The blue-haired young man tenses up, and Yarin starts to notice that the famous hair actually looks like someone else. But the boy ignores him and walks grumpily down the access hall to the classrooms, not wanting to attend class today. He deeply regrets ending up in the F class for demon hunting, grumbling that this field makes him feel useless. Suddenly, the smiling Professor Kim Song-chil appears right behind his shoulder, asking the reason for his gloom. Startled, the young man shouts, wanting to know who he is, and the tutor introduces himself as the one in charge of Class F. The tutor confirms with a serene smile on his face, knowing exactly that he is the new student enrolled there. The boy complains, saying that demon hunters just act like sniffer dogs in boring investigations. The tutor retorts that they face the danger first, and at that moment, Wolfgang quietly enters the room. Wolfgang suddenly stops walking upon recognizing the presence of that blue-haired boy right in front of him. Jin Woo also spots him and becomes completely desperate, pointing his finger in fury at the giant hero. Furious, the boy charges to attack the Barbarian, shouting at him for having the audacity to show up there. He yells that he was humiliated and suffered greatly because of the hero who took away his prestige in the arena. Wolfgang defends the punch with extreme ease, catching Jin Woo's fist and nullifying all the impact. In the blink of an eye, he counterattacks, knocking the muscular young man flat on his back with great ease. The Barbarian keeps his opponent pinned under his weight, demonstrating that his physical strength is far superior. Wolfgang intimidatingly asks if the Seongshan Guild sent him again to try to start trouble. The young man shouts furiously, telling the Barbarian to let him go immediately, and saying he doesn't know about any guild. Suddenly, a hand enveloped in a golden magical aura appears in the middle of the hallway, drawing their attention. The professor uses his telekinesis to separate them, and Jin Woo shouts, complaining that his arm is almost breaking. Wolfgang stares at the tutor very seriously and suspiciously questions the reason for that interference. The tutor just laughs in a friendly way, saying he thought it was better to break up the fight between the two students right there. He ponders that he doesn't want to lose his new students and reminds them that fighting inside the school leads to the direct expulsion. The professor suggests that the two have an official combat training session supervised directly by him. Meanwhile, outside, Junwon strikes up a conversation with the boy, who responds curtly without paying any attention. Junwon notices the boy hasn't changed at all and asks if his family is still pursuing the same power as before. The boy seriously advises them to stop, as his last friendly warning as a former companion. Jin Woo retorts that Junwon is the one who should throw away that useless medallion that almost never works. The businessman retorts that the artifact is the best defense there is against those with demonic contracts. The boy turns his back and coldly says it's better if the two never cross paths again from this day forward. Junwon watches the young man walk away in silence, and then turns thoughtfully to look towards the staircase. Yarin watches the scene, confused, not understanding the strange relationship between those two men. Back at the training, the Barbarian finds it absurd that the professor is demanding they fight using only constellation power. The professor says that hunting demons requires sensitivity to track trails using the power of deities. He concludes by saying that whoever doesn't master this power cannot qualify and warns that he will test both of them there. Wolfgang questions what happens if they fight another way, and the tutor warns they will be transferred to another class. Jin Woo laughs confidently and mocks the barbarian, asking if he's signed up for the class without knowing the basic rules. The hero just ignores the mockery and asks if absolutely all actions require this magical power. The tutor smiles and replies that since it's just a test, he will accept other methods as long as they don't touch. He reminds them it's a training session, but strictly forbids any action that puts the opponent's life at risk. The professor turns his smiling face to the blue-haired young man and asks if he has any questions. The boy displays a strong purple magical aura around him and demands they start the test right away. He walks to his side of the court, saying irritably that he wants to smash that old man's face as soon as possible. Jin Woo warns in a threatening tone for the barbarian to be very careful when stepping onto the court to face his power. He throws a tennis ball engulfed in purple flames, vowing that Wolfgang will pay dearly for getting in his way. The young man hits the ball back, firing a purple fire projectile under the professor's extremely watchful eye. The ball transforms into a true meteor of fire that rushes towards the hero at high speed. Proudly, Jin Woo celebrates, saying he just tried to imitate a real fireball to scare the opponent. Wolfgang stares at the attack without fear and only complains that his new clothes are going to be destroyed again. The boy tells him to give up and beg for forgiveness on his knees if he's scared of that flaming attack. The Barbarian calmly asks to talk for a second, but the young man thinks he's trying to buy time. Wolfgang gets irritated with the childish attitude and realizes he'll have to hit the boy to make him listen for good. He grants the opponent just 1 minute to use absolutely all the magical force he can muster. In the office, Yeren finalizes the full payment of the tuition and thanks them, leaving hurriedly for the court. She and Junwon descend the external stairs at a fast pace, talking about the past of the young Kim Jin Woo. Yeren takes the opportunity of being alone to ask the businessman a personal question, to which he answers directly. She questions if there was any problem between him and Jin Woo back when they studied together at the academy. The businessman just smiles in a friendly way, explaining that they were great rivals with a complex relationship. She is surprised that this feeling continues, even after years, and concludes that time doesn't always heal everything. Yeren finds the whole situation very complicated, but notices they don't hate each other purely and absolutely. Both quicken their pace, heading down towards the courtyard to watch the progress of the first practical test. She agrees thoughtfully, while the man admits he also thought the rivalry between them was different. Junwon concludes thoughtfully that rekindling an old friendship is an extremely difficult task for the proud young man. The blue-haired young man points his finger and proudly says he just tried to imitate a real fireball. The barbarian narrows his gaze and calmly warns that he will grant the young man exactly 1 minute to attack. He imposingly orders the opponent to use absolutely everything he has and show his maximum strength. Suddenly, a large flaming attack explodes right on top of Wolfgang, raising a lot of dust and smoke. The professor watches the scene, perplexed, unable to believe the great destructive power of the blow. He runs desperately towards the court, shouting that the young man went too far and ignored his warnings. The boy grinds his teeth in anger, complaining that Wolfgang completely ruined his spiritual contract. The professor prepares his magic to contain the damage and tells Jin Woo to pray the barbarian wasn't taken out. He advances through the smoke, gathering energy in his hands to try to prevent a worse tragedy in the arena. The cloud of dark dust and debris covers the entire tennis court, preventing them from seeing what happened. Wolfgang emerges unscathed from the smoke, complaining that his new clothes have been completely destroyed. He extends his arm into a glowing portal, calmly asking for leave from those present. In the laboratory, the assistant is startled when the hero's hand emerges from the portal and takes back his fur cloak. Back on the court, the barbarian ties the Fenrir fur cloak around his waist, like a common garment. In the same instant, the spiritual energy of the legendary wolf projects from his cloak and lunges at the adversary, Jin. Wu falls to the ground, trembling and terrified, not understanding what extraordinary ability he used. Wolfgang assumes a savage, combat stance and warns that something has been bothering him greatly from the start. He looks at the boy and reveals that the black tattoo on his arm actually conceals the energy of a malevolent demon. He leaps into the air with great imposition, preparing his iron fist to strike the fallen rebel youth. Wolfgang hits the ground with absurd force next to Jin Wu, causing the entire tennis court to break apart. He maintains his cold expression while the opponent trembles and cries in pure terror at such a demonstration of strength. A huge trail of destruction opens up in the courtyard, revealing the immense and frightening shockwave generated by the blow. Jin Wu holds his injured arm, feeling that strange tattoo mark burn with the energy. The experienced Professor Song Keel watches the scene in panic, noticing that something terrible is manifesting. The mark on his arm glows with red flames, and the young man roars in pain as the energy consumes his body. Wolfgang watches the young man's transformation attentively, trying to understand which demon caused that sealing. The frightening shadow of a monstrous three-headed creature begins to materialize behind Jin Wu. The legendary Cerberus, guardian hound of the underworld, appears imposingly, roaring with fury in the middle of the schoolyard. A shadowy figure demands that he make a pact with the monster to regain his old magical powers. The boy refuses, horrified to make a pact with a demon, fearing the price it would demand is his soul. But the shadowy figure pressures him severely, warning that if he refuses the deal, he will end up passing on soon. The infernal hound roars threateningly, and the panicked young man shouts for everyone to run and save their own lives. Wolfgang simply shuts the young man up with his giant hand, calming him down and telling him not to give in to fear. He firmly guarantees that no one will perish today and explains that the beast only grows stronger with their dread. The hero says that if the young man gives in, the demon will demand a terrible price, requiring his own life expectancy. He reveals he has seen many souls destroyed by pacts, and doesn't want to see this terrible tragedy repeat itself. He orders the young man to calm his breathing and to look the monstrous three-headed hound directly in the eyes. The professor prepares to act with his golden magic, while observing the immense courage of that barbarian hero. Wolfgang promises to show in practice that depending on a demon's power will never be the real path to strength. The tutor smirks, finding the pair very promising, while the boy stares at the fur cloak, intrigued. Suddenly, the magnificent and colossal silhouette of the wolf Fenrir manifests on the court, glowing with blue flames. The immense bluish aura envelopes the entire tennis court, leaving the blue-haired boy completely breathless. The legendary wolf roars imposingly, recognizing Wolfgang's presence in command of that battle. Wolfgang greets him as his old friend and suggests they test if his sharp fangs have lost their edge over time. Fenrir responds imposingly, complaining that the opponent is too weak and has already lost all will to fight. The hero clarifies that he summoned him to announce a new beginning, and that demons are still active in the modern era. The wolf comments that 1,000 years have passed but notices he is still bound by the chains of past vengeance. He tells the hero to settle the fight alone, and decides to return to his plane to accumulate more magical power. Jin Wu stares at the floor dumbfounded, unable to process the fact that he just saw and heard a giant wolf speak. Outside, Yeren walks calmly through the school courtyard, awaiting the end of Wolfgang's tests. Yeren complains irritably about the delay, while the man in the suit comes down the stairs trying to calm her. The man in the suit is surprised and points, to something strange approaching in the sky. A huge magical sword crosses the blue sky, spinning at high speed and catching his attention. Wolfgang follows the weapon's path with his eyes and realizes it's heading in the right direction. He grumbles that the sword's owner is too slow and really lives up to her reputation as an ancient relic. He points upward while the two infernal hounds by his side watch the scene. Startled, the gigantic sword falls from the sky and embeds itself in the ground with violence, raising dark smoke. A plaque identifies Professor Kim Sung-cheol, explaining that pacts with demons are not illegal. He questions the young man about his influential family and the reason for making such a dangerous pact. The professor remains curious. As someone as wealthy as him could easily obtain a sacred relic, Jinwoo avoids looking the master in the eyes and shyly asks if he really needs to answer that. The counselor explains that he needs to understand the situation to be able to help him become a hunter. He reveals that the pact made with Cerberus is so dangerous that it consumes half of his life expectancy. Wolfgang is shocked to discover the severity of that spiritual contract that consumes the young man's life. Jinwoo becomes thoughtful and wonders if he was always considered the unwanted child of his family. He remembers everyone celebrating greatly when his older brother made the pact with the constellation. The pact with that foreign entity quickly became the most talked about topic in the entire region. With so much prestige, it seemed only a matter of time before they became the most powerful family in the country. He reveals that his father's great dream was always to become a legendary martial artist in the world. The contract with the entity grew so much that it eventually extended to all family members. Everyone was extremely happy with that achievement. But things soon started to go wrong. The second son, considered a failure, ended up causing a disaster and lost the constellation's protection. Jinwoo laments bitterly, blaming that person for having ruined his family's reputation. Wolfgang listens to the outburst seriously and calmly questions how that could be his fault. In the past, the hero asked the entity if the reason for its fury was a mistake in the young man's treatment. A mysterious voice apologized for the young man's mistake and begged for the powerful entity's forgiveness. Wolfgang clarifies that his punishment was already over and that the rest was just a family matter. The hero decided to forgive the young man, but warned that he was using his power completely wrong. The shadowy figure agreed immediately, stating that it already had plans to resolve that situation. Wolfgang confesses he didn't expect the pact to be cancelled, but the entity already distrusted the family. Jinwoo stands up, outraged, saying his brother was a genius and that he was the one who deserved to lose the deal. Wolfgang says he doesn't know his brother, but guarantees they weren't using the power correctly. He explains it's not a matter of talent, but of compatibility with the strength that was granted to them. The indignant young man points his finger, demanding to know what they did wrong with the received energy. Suddenly, the office door is forced open by a man in a gray sweatshirt who enters furiously. Jinwoo's eyes widen, extremely scared, upon recognizing his own brother standing there in the doorway. The older brother looks at the boy with a gaze of pure fury and orders him to get out of there immediately. Outside, the young red-haired woman runs desperately along the sidewalks of the academy campus. She shouts for her companion to hurry up before a new widespread confusion happens at the school. The man in the suit falls behind, completely exhausted, and curses the enormous number of stairs. Jinwoo begs for forgiveness as his brother drags him by the collar humiliatingly across the floor. The young man screams in pain, asking his brother to stop, but is ignored and dragged out of the building. Seen from above, the older brother continues to drag the younger one without showing any mercy. He throws the young man violently onto the garden grass, leaving him fallen and quite bruised. Jinwoo cries from pain and humiliation while trying to recover from the impact on the schoolyard grass. The older one tells him to stop crying and angrily asks if getting contracts canceled has become his hobby. He kicks his own brother in anger shouting that he worked so hard to get him into that hunter academy. In the hallway, the master comments that they couldn't even talk about the hero. Due to the students' commotion, Wolfgang responds seriously that if there is any problem, he needs to know about it immediately. The professor smirks and replies enigmatically that the situation is actually the opposite. The adversary provokes Wolfgang on the court, telling him to kneel and admit defeat once and for all. Wolfgang walks beside the professor and asks if he knew about the demonic energy from the beginning. The professor proudly confesses that he knows how to use a constellation's abilities better than anyone else. He admits it took him much longer to notice the dark energy in Jinwoo than in Wolfgang himself. He explains he was only sure it was the terrible Cerberus after the beast finally left the body. Moreover, the hero noticed a strange distortion in space that made things quite difficult there. The powerful summoning magic was used, bringing legendary and frightening creatures into the midst of the battle. The situation became even more complicated with the use of a powerful ability similar to telekinesis in the air. The master wonders why he came to the academy, since he uses so many different techniques with ease. Wolfgang listens in silence and directly asks what his conclusion is about everything that happened. He suggests the hero take the promotion exam soon to advance quickly, as there's nothing to learn there. Wolfgang suddenly grabs the professor's shoulder firmly and tells him to wait. As he heard something strange, the older brother continues to beat Jinwoo on the grass, complaining that he ruined all his effort. Yarin arrives running at the scene and screams in horror, asking what he is doing to his own brother. She is completely outraged and questions the reason for so much gratuitous violence against the fallen young man. The aggressor looks at her with disdain and tells her to get out of the way, saying she shouldn't meddle in the matter. The man in the suit appears and holds the aggressor brother, warning that he will end up taking out his own younger brother. He begs the young man to calm down, reminding him that he never acted with such cruelty and fury in the past. The annoyed brother tries to break free and shouts that if he doesn't do anything, that useless brat will only get worse. Suddenly, a huge hand appears and grabs his face with force, completely interrupting his aggression. Everyone is in absolute shock to see the red mark of a strong slap printed on the aggressor's face. Someone grabs his wrist and sternly warns that fights outside of dungeons can lead to expulsion. The professor firmly holds the violent young man's wrist, maintaining a dark expression behind his hair. The master warns with a scary smile that he dragged his dear student right before his eyes. He calmly suggests that the young man stop the aggression before things get really bad there. His gaze shines threateningly, revealing that he is fully willing to fight right there. The older brother backs away, startled, upon hearing the professor refer to the younger one as his own student. The aggressor questions how the younger brother, without a spiritual contract, could be admitted to the prestigious school. The master clarifies that having a contract or not is a completely irrelevant matter for being his student. The gray-haired young man stares at the professor in silence, trying to understand the man's real intentions. The master's yellowish eyes glow intensely, making his unshackable authority in the place clear. Surprisingly, the older brother gives in and humbly asks that they accept the younger brother into the school. After making his desperate request, he turns his back on the group and walks slowly towards the exit. In the infirmary of Building F, the professor explains that the school's magical barriers help heal injuries. He comments with regret that young Jinwoo's real wound is hidden deep in his heart. Yarin becomes worried and deduces that all this suffering is directly related to his violent brother. The professor sighs deeply before beginning to reveal the secrets of that family's past. Jinwoo remembers when he screamed desperately, saying his genius brother should never lose the contract. He recalls defending his older brother's genius with tooth and nail in front of the Barbarian. The brother bitterly remembers the moment when the powerless younger brother was accepted as a student by a great master. At that moment, he realized he had to swallow his immense pride to ensure the younger brother's future. The master concludes thoughtfully that there are surely deep secrets that only the two brothers share. Suddenly, Wolfgang calmly opens the room door and informs everyone that he is leaving. Yeren points to the huge bag on his back, and he confirms that he's taking the Hellhound's remains. In the parking lot, the man in the suit reprimands the young man. Saying that aggression should have been avoided, he reminds him that they are a family. But the young man curtly replies, for him not to meddle in the matter. The man in the suit questions if his drastic change in behavior is related to his recent mysterious disappearance. He asks what excuse would justify hitting his brother and questions him about his secret investigations. Night falls over the academy parking lot as the two continue their tense conversation. The young man gets into the car and coldly reveals that he stopped investigating his own father because he left the association. Jinzong asks if the Hunter Association already knows that their father had contact with that energy. The young man in the suit confesses that he omitted the details in the final report to avoid bigger problems with the group. The Hunter Association would certainly be furious if they discovered he is using a demon's power. Jinzong concludes that his ally decided not to report the incident to the association, just to try to protect him. He becomes thoughtful, not knowing whether to thank him for this help or to hold a grudge against his ally. The man in the suit silently watches the vehicle drive away on the road as the sun sets on the horizon. An illuminated sign in front of a large building identifies the Hunter Association headquarters at night. The brown-haired young man is shocked to hear they plan to make armor using Cerberus's remains. Wolfgang confirms the intention while drinking soda and asks if he knows any skilled blacksmiths in the region. Wolfgang drinks his soda calmly while asking the other to explain how the modern market works. He explains that nowadays, hunters sell monster carcasses on the market and buy ready-made equipment. Yeren hesitates a bit, saying she doesn't use the market much and that its transaction fees are very high. The assistant decides to list the item in exchange for future help with his scientific research, and she accepts immediately. When asked what equipment to buy with the sale money, Wolfgang confesses he doesn't need anything. The hero's revelation leaves the pair extremely confused, not understanding who will receive the new armor. The company president learns that Cerberus's hide has been listed and that his youngest son has not yet returned. The powerful man narrows his eyes, surprised to discover that his youngest son is still missing. The secretary reports the entire fight between Jinwoo and Wolfgang, and the subsequent beating the young man took from his own brother. Upon hearing Wolfgang's name, the president immediately orders a cleaner to be hired to handle the case secretly. He changes his mind and decides to keep Jinwoo alive somehow, just to ensure Jinseong's mental stability. From inside the room, the president orders the younger son to be brought back so he himself can decide the punishment. Jinseong stops his steps in the dark hallway, showing great concern for his brother's safety. His father appears behind him by surprise and asks, since when the young man had been listening to that confidential conversation, he apologizes to his father with his head down, while the man coldly assures him there's nothing to fear. The patriarch reveals with an ambitious look that soon a powerful entity will awaken and give them control of the world. Jinseong starts to sweat from pure terror as he realizes the immense madness behind his father's ambitious plans. He bows respectfully before his father and decides to leave as quickly as possible to process everything. The businessman coldly orders the secretary to keep a constant watch on Jinseong as well. Lying on a hospital bed in the school's infirmary, Jinwoo lets out a long, deep sigh of weariness. He remembers when his brother handed him a paper containing the drawing of a secret magical mark. The drawing showed the frightening face of Cerberus for him to tattoo on his body and make a new pact The older brother guaranteed that accepting the monster's demands would easily turn him into a C-level hunter. However, the younger brother refused, scared, saying he preferred to train hard to establish the deal with the constellation. Jinzong warned seriously that if he didn't accept the demonic pact, he would end up being eliminated by his own father. He revealed that the patriarch wouldn't hesitate to take them out, and that the deal with the demon would serve as protection. The young man explained that his father spent years trying to awaken an incredible power that the association couldn't ignore. The younger brother suggested asking a friend from the association for help, but hesitated upon learning the price of half his lifespan. With his eyes obscured by shadows, the older brother bitterly confessed that he couldn't do that. He began to cry, sadly revealing that if he did that, his dear ally would end up being taken out. He desperately asked the younger brother to obey, as that was the only alternative for everyone to survive. Jinwoo cries in silence, remembering all the pain his older brother is carrying alone to save him. Suddenly, a blue glow appears in the air in the middle of the room, and a giant hand begins to materialize in the portal. Jinwoo wakes up startled and jumps out of bed, thinking a bizarre ghost is trying to grab him there. Wolfgang sticks his arm through the magic portal to grab the boy comically while his companions watch. In the middle of the cold night, Jinsong runs at high speed down the stairs and slides on his knees on the asphalt. He runs desperately, knowing he needs to act very quickly before his father's goons reach his brother. In the office, the experienced master stretches in his chair upon realizing the agreed upon time has arrived. He watches through the glass window the masked silhouette of the young man running at full speed through the schoolyard. The master smirks, finding it quite curious to see the young man acting so desperately at that time of night. The masked young man opens the infirmary door, but finds only the empty bed with the blue portal closing. Jinziong cautiously enters the dark room. Hoping he has found the correct rescue location, he quickly opens the infirmary curtains to check his brother is still resting there. The young man in the cap is completely surprised to face the completely empty hospital bed. Before him, he curses, annoyed for not having considered the possibility that his brother had already left the infirmary room. Suddenly, a strong golden magical energy envelopes his body and levitates him into the air, deeply frightening him. The professor appears at the door and reveals that he already suspected the masked intruder was actually Jin Seong himself. The master firmly orders him to come along quietly to avoid causing a bigger disturbance in the school. In another room, the young Jinwoo shrinks against the wall, terrified, and asks why they keep approaching him. Wolfgang says he will make him his first subordinate, and tells the young man to take off his clothes to take his measurements. The bearded hero proposes to help him establish the pact with the constellation if he proves he's a true warrior. Jinwoo's eyes widen, unable to believe there's a real chance of recovering his old contract. Wolfgang warns that he can't guarantee anything, but says everything will depend on him becoming a warrior worthy of respect. The young man looks at the veteran with determination, realizing that his future is now entirely in his own hands. He lets out a nervous and relieved laugh, feeling a huge wave of hope return to his chest. Jinwoo falls to his knees, begging him to teach him how to become the warrior the barbarian so desires. Wolfgang solemnly declares that from that moment on, the young man will be reborn as the strongest shield warrior. The boy blinks, confused, and tries to understand the real meaning of becoming a shield specialist warrior. The assistant jots down all the young man's measurements and says that now they just need to find the right equipment for him. The experienced warrior points out that only a large shield is necessary and that the rest of the pieces don't matter as much. He celebrates, saying they've already received an offer for Cerberus's carcass and can forge the new shield with it. The group decides to head immediately to the storage to check the condition of that valuable demonic material. Jinwoo carries the heavy burden on his back, while anxiously wondering who might have bought that material. He secretly hopes that his feared father is not behind that mysterious black market purchase. Yurin looks at her cell phone screen and realizes she has just received an urgent message from one of the professors back in the office. The professor calmly places the cell phone on his dark wooden desk. He walks calmly through the office and incessantly orders the intruder to state the real reason for his visit. The master questions if he intended to mark his brother again, ignoring the terrible price demanded by that demon. Faced with the young man's tense silence, the professor calmly concludes that perhaps it's better not to answer, that now the master offers to help him escape. But the young man refuses, saying the situation is too serious for him. The professor reveals he knows where the younger brother is, but seriously warns that he cannot accept the boy into the school. Jinzong becomes desperate and demands an explanation from the master, reminding him of the previous commitment to accept his brother. He clarifies that demon hunters constantly face their end and cannot use the school as a mere refuge. The master says he can help. But first, he demands a sincere explanation about the two brothers' real problem. Jinzeong decides to reveal the whole truth about his family's past and the fact that his father was not chosen. He says his father has a lot of money, but has always desired the divine power that common wealth could never buy. The young man explains that after losing the Constellation's contract, he was summarily banned from all influential circles. He points out that his proud father is not the type to accept the humiliation of losing prestige without acting with fury. The master deduces with horror that the patriarch decided to resort to a secret contract with a demonic entity. The young man says that only the Hunter Association would have the strength to stop his possessed father, but doubts they will act. The professor questions why he pressured his younger brother so much, and if that was really necessary. He reveals he offered the pact with the demon to Jinwoo only to prevent their corrupted father from taking him out. He clenches his hands tightly and explains he hit his brother to feign punishment and prevent their father from acting personally. However, the plan failed because his father has already called in the feared cleaner to put a definitive end to the whole situation. The professor slams the table in total shock upon hearing that an elite criminal hunter organization is involved. He confirms grimly and warns that not even the powerful professor would stand a chance against such strong assassins. The young man accepts all the blame, saying he did the best he could to prevent his brother from being taken out by their father. Understanding the gravity of that terrible conspiracy, the master sits in his chair, completely actionless. He deeply regrets it, knowing that none of this would have happened if he still maintained the divine alliance of the past. Jinzeong states with determination that despite everything, he will never tolerate seeing his own father hurting his beloved brother. With a gaze full of fury, he swears to himself that he will put a definitive end to that terrible family crisis. The next day, the routine in the big city seems to continue normally under a clean, blue sky. The young Jinwoo stares at the ground with a look of pure exhaustion and resignation at his new fate. The assistant proudly displays the newly forged shield, guaranteeing the piece will be extremely useful. Wolfgang tests the weapon in the air, praising the lightness and high resistance of that defensive equipment. Jinwoo complains irritably, saying he'd prefer to use much cooler weapons like swords or battle hammers. The experienced warrior coldly warns that he is too weak to be able to harm a demon with common weapons. He points out that by focusing only on defense, the young man will at least have a real chance of surviving the fights. Wolfgang confirms bluntly and states seriously that the boy doesn't know how to use his full strength. He recalls the previous duel when the young man tried to hit him with strong but totally predictable punches. The Barbarian explains that common punches don't defeat monsters and that he needs to channel the energy at the right moment. He recalls the boy's fatal mistake in combat which forced him to resort to the terrible power of a demon. The younger brother stares at the reflective metal shield, silently absorbing every word of the rigorous training. Meanwhile, the immense mansion of President Kim Tae-won stands out under the radiant light of the afternoon sun. In a dark basement of the residence, a secret door opens, revealing a staircase shrouded in shadows. In the darkness, the president makes a cut on his own hand, spilling his blood on a ceremonial altar. The man curses furiously against the association, vowing to become the strongest hunter of all with the pact. He squeezes his injured fist, causing the dark blood to drip directly into the golden ritualistic basin. The reddish liquid begins to react violently as the drops of sacrifice fall onto its surface. A gigantic red magic circle lights up on the basement floor, releasing a frightening, unholy energy. The patriarch screams in ecstasy, offering his blood as a sacrifice to the feared and merciless entity of darkness. The man cries out for the evil forces to destroy the established order and bring ruin to the entire world. Suddenly, the daytime sky over the mansion begins to darken rapidly with the arrival of heavy clouds. The accomplices watch the scene, laughing and celebrating the immense wealth and power they will soon gain from the ritual. The unholy magic circle shines even brighter, demanding flesh and blood as an offering for the summoning. A portal of red, bubbling sludge begins to open in the center of the altar, releasing the terror of the abyss. Bolts of purple and dark energy crackle in the air as the hidden forces finally begin to materialize. A colossal and frightening demonic hand made of pure red fire emerges from the portal, roaring violently. The president himself backs away, terrified, as he comes face to face with the colossal monstrosity he has just summoned. The hand of red flames lunges forward violently and grabs the man by the neck, relentlessly and cruelly. His eyes widen as he feels his air completely cut off by the absurd force of that demonic claw. The secretary and his accomplice panic as they realize the ritual has gone completely out of their control. The tentacles of dark energy begin to spread across the entire basement floor, dragging the witnesses. The colossal Lord of Darkness, wrapped in iron chains, rises imposingly, completely dominating the place. The assistant stutters in terror as he sees his boss being dragged and entangled by sharp chains. Drops of red liquid fly through the air as the unholy energy begins to mercilessly consume the man's body. The bizarre creature boasts monstrous features and sharp teeth as the chains jingle around it. The monster lifts the accomplice into the air using its heavy chains, while the president watches helplessly. The partner stares at the terrible scene with eyes wide with pure horror. Unable to show any reaction, the beast's hideous jaw opens, revealing pointed fangs hungry for more souls and human sacrifices. The unholy abyss consumes the lives of the witnesses in a true sea of red and flames under the demon's lauder. The creature's terrible reddish eye glows intensely as it feels the absolute success of its resurrection. The president cries out for help, desperately realizing that his own body has begun to act against his will. The father's desperate voice resonates in the older son's mind, begging them to call someone to stop him. The younger brother also feels the terrible and distressing premonition echo in the air, demanding they find a solution quickly. The man's appeal echoes desperately as he tries to maintain his own consciousness before being completely possessed. Outside, the night sky takes on a sinister tone with the appearance of a colossal and frightening red moon. The master shouts, scared, asking what is happening, and begins to suspect the worst-case scenario has come true. Jinzong feels a strange tremor shake the ground as the air around begins to vibrate menacingly. Suddenly, his ally calls desperately, shouting that a huge emergency has just happened at the family residence. Jinzong clenches the phone in fury upon receiving the terrible confirmation that his father has finally completed the pact. In the basement of the Archaeology Hunter Association, Jinwoo stares at his new shield in front of Wolfgang. He complains about the tight space of the storage room, but she explains they don't have a proper combat room. Wolfgang calls the young man lackey number 1 and says he rushes into fights too much, losing his balance. The veteran demonstrates how this rashness leaves his guard completely open to enemy counterattacks. The boy takes a deep breath and decides to test the new defensive tactic to prove he's learned his lesson. He assumes a firm guard stance, raising the heavy metal shield right in front of his body. Wolfgang warns that he'll only give a light test blow but lunges forward, delivering an extremely monstrous punch. The impact is so absurd that it generates an immense shockwave through the room, startling the young assistant. Jinwoo grinds his teeth, feeling the overwhelming force of the blow reverberate violently through his arms. The impact raises a cloud of dust and destroys several boxes that were stacked around the courtyard. The force of the punch simply blinds everyone in the room with a sudden flash for a few moments. The young man catches his breath with difficulty and complains indignantly that it didn't feel like a light blow at all. Wolfgang cracks his knuckles and praises the young man for managing to stay on his feet after receiving that punch. Jinwoo and his ally silently observe the huge mess and the damage caused by the training in that storage room. The barbarian steps back and tells the boy to memorize that guard stance well, while he watches from a distance. Yaren praises the hero's seriousness in training, but he says Jinwoo is strong for having scored well on the exams. Wolfgang laughingly remembers the promotion test that he ended up completely breaking with just a bit of his strength. Suddenly, the forgotten cell phone on one of the tables begins to vibrate quite insistently. Jinwoo quickly answers the call with a big smile on his face, interrupting his defense training. Wolfgang complains that his posture collapsed in an instant, while the young woman tries to lighten the mood. The younger brother's eyes widen in pure terror upon hearing the terrible news revealed on the other end of the line. He apologizes and runs desperately towards the exit, saying he needs to go home quickly. Yaren is worried about the sudden departure, but the barbarian just stares at the floor, feeling a terrible premonition. In another part of the city, the professor shouts in shock upon learning that the president has performed the descent ritual. Jinzong confirms with regret that his father didn't just make a common contract, but a real demonic summoning. The secretary nervously assures that the boss was still conscious and begs them to hurry to stop him. Jinzong says he'll handle it alone, but the professor warns that a demonic descent is no longer a family matter. He insists that the professor needs to contact the association personally, as only his word carries weight. The secretary begs to accompany the rescue of his wife, and Jinseong calms him, promising to bring her back without wasting another second. The group splits up and sprints through the dark streets of that large city. Back in the basement, Wolfgang reveals he's feeling something very strange in the air and decides to leave immediately. Yaren jokes, asking if he wants to escape the cleanup, but the hero responds with extreme seriousness in his eyes. Upon leaving the building, the assistant is startled to notice that day has simply turned into night in the blink of an eye. The warrior squints, immediately identifying the terrible and repulsive energy consuming the skies. He reveals that a powerful demon has just appeared on Earth, leaving the young woman completely stunned. She explains that a common pact is completely different from the physical manifestation of an abyssal creature on the planet. She gulps, desperately realizing that the rules of the world she knew have drastically changed. Wolfgang tenses his muscles, wreathed in orange flames, feeling that a large-scale invasion has begun. Purplish lightning bolts cross the clouds, marking the return of the forces of darkness. After waiting for over 1,000 years, Jinzong continues to run desperately. Climbing the stairs towards the gates of his father's mansion, the young man grinds his teeth in pure anguish, hoping with all his might that he hasn't arrived too late. He extends a trembling, sweaty hand and grabs the large metal knocker to open the main door at once. Upon invading the residence, he is faced with a frightening and intense red light shining at the end of the hallway. Deep incandescent cracks begin to cut through the wooden floor, spreading reddish flames around. Suddenly, a colossal explosion of destructive energy erupts from the basement, breaking the entire surrounding scenery. The young man protects his face with his arms, shouting for his father amidst that devastating storm of debris. He stares at the center of the smoke with wide eyes, noticing that something indescribable is materializing. His gaze overflows with pure terror as he tries to process the bizarre nature of that colossal monstrosity. A colossal pillar of bloody energy rises to the heavens, touching the feared red moon in a macabre spectacle. A gigantic demonic sword embeds itself in the ground with violence, opening deep fissures throughout the mansion. Wolfgang prepares for battle and seriously orders Yeren to immediately find a safe shelter to hide in. The assistant begs him to be careful and reminds him that hunter reinforcements are already on their way. The barbarian hero slams his foot against the ground with brutal force, breaking the asphalt under his leather boot. He charges at high speed with his colossal sword in hand, ready to slice through any dark threat. Wolfgang leaps between buildings under the red moon, declaring that the last barbarian is coming to hunt them. Dense black smoke and burning flames rise from the streets, revealing the trail of destruction left by the ritual. Jinzong brays with extreme difficulty, feeling the exhaustion and toxic smoke burning his injured lungs. The young man screams desperately, begging his father to try to regain control and resist the demon. Suddenly, a heavy and sharp metal chain is shot from the shadows towards the young man in the gray sweatshirt. The chain hits him squarely, throwing his body backward with overwhelming and merciless force. A dark, demonic voice echoes in the place, coldly stating that his father's soul no longer exists there. The monster walks slowly towards the fallen young man and sadistically asks him not to despair. With glowing red eyes, the creature vows to start with them before exterminating the entire human race. The bizarre creature repeats with contempt that his father's human soul has been completely erased from the world. The demon mocks the fallen young man, telling him not to hold a grudge over the tragic end of his family. With a gaze full of fury and sadism, it vows to begin the extermination of the human race with that young man. Jinzong cries with rage, begging his father to come to his senses, but the demon finds that attitude foolish and useless. Without any patience, the monster fires a deadly attack to end the young man's life once and for all. He closes his eyes tightly, gritting his teeth, refusing to accept that his journey will end there. Suddenly, a huge shield appears at the last second, blocking the fatal attack with an immense metallic impact. Jinzong is extremely shocked to open his eyes and see his younger brother protecting him with the shield. Jinwoo smiles confidently and tells him not to worry because this time, he's the one who will ensure his safety. In a dungeon in China, 2A class hunters advance carefully, keeping their guard up completely. A fire-breathing monster appears, roaring loudly, and unleashes a huge and devastating column of flames in their direction. The hunter raises a blue magical barrier and orders his ally to quickly take shelter behind his protection. The young female hunter leaps with extreme agility through the flames, preparing a devastating counterattack. Her companion celebrates upon seeing that she managed to repel the monster's charge with her incredible shield technique. He leaps from a great height, pointing his sharp spear directly at the head of the flaming creature. With a roar of fury, he drives his spear with brutal force to put a definitive end to the dungeon monster. The monster roars in pain and collapses, defeated, raising a lot of dust on the stone floor of the underground temple. The two hunters celebrate, extremely happy to have successfully completed the difficult A-class dungeon. They jump for joy, raising their weapons and celebrating that they are truly the best hunters in that region. Suddenly, a sharp shadow pierces the young female hunter's body, brutally interrupting her celebration. She coughs up a lot of red liquid, her eyes wide, unable to understand what just pierced her chest. The girl falls weakly, and her partner runs desperately to catch her in his arms before she hits the ground. He shouts in fury, demanding to know who did it, but is cut in the chest by a swift and invisible attack. He coughs up red liquid and realizes with terror that he couldn't even see the trajectory of the extremely fast blow. The two hunters collapse lifelessly on the ground, while the masked assassin wipes the liquid from his dark dagger. The criminal reports the elimination of the targets and says he will leave immediately in search of his next victim. He stares at his cell phone screen, which displays a photo of the barbarian hero Wolfgang as the next target on his blacklist. Atop a building, the assassin watches Wolfgang walk, oblivious to his presence. Amidst all that chaos, the villain raises a strange, spiky device, finding it bizarre that a NEF-level hunter is his target. He throws the magical weapon in a free fall, aiming to hit the hero by surprise with a single crushing blow. Wolfgang reacts with incredible reflexes and blocks the projectile using his colossal sword without getting a single scratch. The device explodes, releasing a dense and mysterious green smoke that completely envelopes the hero on the spot. The assassin watches Wolfgang cough in the middle of the poisonous mist. Believing he has successfully completed his mission, he celebrates the victory, but is confused to receive a desperate warning from his constellation, telling him to retreat. Suddenly, a swift figure emerges from the shadows, delivering a surprise attack against the startled villain. The assassin is cut with extreme violence in the chest and sprays a lot of red liquid. Not even seeing the attack pass, he coughs up red liquid, unable to comprehend how the opponent survived the poisonous smoke and managed to retaliate. Wolfgang stares at the enemy coldly and imposingly, warning that he is the only true hunter in that place. Returning to the brothers' fight, the demonic chain attacks again, ricocheting off the broken courtyard floor. Jinwoo uses all his strength to block the charges of the metal chains, using his heavy iron shield. The younger brother asks if his brother is okay, and he replies with difficulty, telling the boy to protect himself from the enemy. The younger brother focuses on maintaining his low guard stance, remembering the barbarian's advice to be able to resist. The red beast leaps into the air with extreme fury and hits Jinwoo's shield, sending him flying with the impact. With the violence of the punch, both brothers end up rolling injured on the destroyed ground of the mansion's courtyard. Jinwoo gets up, stumbling, and prepares to defend his brother again from the terrible possessed monster. The young man becomes extremely tense upon noticing that the dark energy is attracting even more dangers to the location. An abyssal fiery rift opens, revealing the silhouette of the beast dominating the top of the hill of burning rocks. The ground continues to tremble and break under the immense magical pressure released from that terrible portal of the underworld. A monstrous and giant claw emerges from the fiery abyss, supporting itself on the floor's fissures with absurd violence. A colossal army of hungry demonic beasts begins to emerge from the fiery rift to invade the planet. Jinwoo watches in total shock as the gigantic horde of monsters begins to appear before his eyes. A colossal stone creature advances, roaring loudly and making the entire ground tremble with its heavy steps. The boy focuses on maintaining concentration, knowing that if he gives up now, his brother will end up perishing there. The golem delivers a monstrous punch, but Jinwoo manages to contain the impact using all the strength of his shield. He grits his teeth, feeling the crushing pressure of the monster's punch reverberate throughout his entire body. Fallen on the ground, the older brother watches the younger one resist and begs him to hold on just a little longer. Jinwoo lets out a roar of determination, focusing only on holding back the monsters until reinforcements arrive. The boy withstands another violent charge from the giant beast, blocking the attack with extreme mastery. He uses the edge of his metal shield to deflect the attacks of the creatures that advance relentlessly. Another violent blow collides with his metal barrier, raising sparks and a lot of dust around the courtyard. Jinwoo slides back with the impact, but keeps his guard firm and continues to protect his battered brother. A new bizarre monster full of tentacles advances, roaring with sharp teeth, directly towards the pair. The creature hits the shield with extreme violence, causing deep fissures to open in the metal barrier. The shield begins to break before his eyes, but he refuses to retreat. Knowing he needs to save his brother, the many-eyed beast opens its giant jaw and prepares to swallow the young man once and for all. Suddenly, a gigantic sword falls from the sky, cutting the monster in half with incredible precision and strength. The young man is completely dumbfounded to see the colossal weapon save his life at the very last millisecond. The magnificent sword fixes itself in the stone ground, while the monster's mortal remains turn to dark ashes. He hears the imposing voice of the barbarian hero Wolfgang praising his courage and resistance during the combat. Wolfgang proudly declares that the boy has proven to be a true warrior worthy of wielding that shield. Jinzong murmurs the legendary warrior's name weakly, and with relief upon seeing their salvation has arrived, the experienced warrior turns his back on the pair and assumes his battle stance, facing the army of beasts. With his eyes glowing intensely with a blue aura, he grits his teeth, overcome by a wild and relentless fury. He roars loudly and delivers a devastating sword strike that unleashes an immense blast of blue energy through the air. The shock wave cuts through the advancing monsters in front, opening a huge path of destruction in the horde. The beasts scream in pure agony as their bodies are instantly torn apart by the barbarian's brutal blow. Wolfgang orders the young man to rest for a bit and assures him he will take care of the rest of the army alone. However, the powerful Lord of Darkness, wrapped in red chains, prepares to intercept him on the way. The ground shatters violently again under the immense pressure of the imminent clash between the two warriors. The barbarian advances with ferocity, ignoring the cutting chains, and focuses on delivering the attack directly against the beast. The Lord of Darkness roars loudly and extends its claws, unleashing even more cursed steel links in his direction. Another devastating impact shatters the entire asphalt, scattering incandescent rock fragments across the sidewalks. The experienced warrior easily dodges the attacks and continues to advance relentlessly towards the center of the ritual. He clashes blades with the beast and demands to know the origin of the ritual, promising it a quick end if it cooperates. The demon lets out a sadistic laugh and mocks the human warrior's audacity for daring to speak to it in such a way. Wolfgang seriously warns that if it refuses his offer, it will end up being completely erased from existence itself. The monster roars furiously, calling him a miserable worm, and challenges him to try to take it down if he really has the ability. Suddenly, a powerful shadow magic binds the barbarian hero's arms, limiting his attack movements. He strains with extreme force to break free, and grumbles irritably that cheap restraining tricks won't be able to stop him. The Lord of Darkness raises its enormous iron fist and delivers a lethal blow to crush the hero by surprise. Wolfgang lets out a savage roar that echoes piercingly throughout the entire area of the destroyed basement courtyard. The monster retreats in surprise, noticing that the magical prison barrier has begun to crack under his immense strength. Wolfgang breaks the shadow links, accumulating his inner energy in a true spectacle of pure physical strength. The restraining bonds explode completely, scattering fragments of unholy magic through the air of that destroyed arena. Completely free, the warrior delivers a fantastic sequence of cuts with his colossal sword, bathed in a blue aura. The demon floats in the air, shocked to see that he freed himself easily, and recognizes that this is no ordinary human. A colossal and destructive torrent of combat energy advances against the creature, breaking the opponent's defenses. Wolfgang leaps into the air with extreme agility, preparing his heavy magical blade to deliver a new lethal attack. The blow hits the beast's chest with devastating violence, opening a large gash in its carcass of black flames. The monster staggers backward from the impact, feeling for the first time the real weight of that warrior's strength. The demon collapses violently after the powerful attack, opening deep fissures in the destroyed asphalt. Wolfgang looks at it with extreme contempt, coldly stating that it is too weak to deserve being remembered. The Lord of Darkness roars with hatred at the human's provocation and orders its lackeys to finish him off. The colossal stone golem raises its brutal fists, advancing with blind fury towards the barbarian hero. Jinwoo runs in desperation, carrying his injured brother on his back, and shouts for the hero to be careful. The golem smashes the ground with absurd violence, sending stone splinters throughout the entire confrontation area. With a gaze full of fury and determination, the experienced warrior prepares to retaliate against the attack. Wolfgang delivers a blow so devastating that it breaks and cracks the entire rocky structure of the colossal opponent. Jinwoo stares at the scene, completely surprised by the immense trail of destruction generated by that attack. In that moment of pure terror, the young hunter understood that the barbarian possesses a legendary and absurd strength. The boy concludes, scared, that he must do everything to never annoy or go against that warrior. Jinwoo runs desperately, dodging the gigantic rebel of the beast that collapses. Defeated on the asphalt, Wolfgang turns to him imposingly, ordering him to get his injured brother out of there and find shelter. He obeys instantly, mentally thanking them for having such an incredibly strong warrior fighting by their side. The Lord of Darkness roars with hatred and desperately realizes it will be forced to release its true secret power. A thick, reddish smoke begins to envelop the demon while the hero watches it without any fear. The villain begins a bizarre transformation, activating its dark evolution magic to increase its power. Wolfgang watches the metamorphosis with disdain, grumbling that the enemy only has annoying defensive tricks. The demon advances in its new evolved form, delivering a swift charge to tear the barbarian to pieces for good. Wolfgang wields his colossal magical sword firmly and prepares to deflect the beast's dangerous attack. The two combatants exchange swift blows in the air, generating trails of blue and red energy all over the sidewalk. Jinwoo watches the combat, terrified, as he sees the beast dissolve into smoke to dodge the lethal blows. The creature of red flames appears by surprise from above, delivering a deadly punch to the hero's nape. The monster laughs mockingly, scoffing at the barbarian's audacity and his pathetic attempt to try to eliminate it. The demon's claw tears the warrior's face as he tries to contain the charge at the last moment with his own arms. The villain flashes a hideous smile of pure malice, believing that victory against the human is completely guaranteed. But the experienced barbarian ignores the wound and retaliates by spinning his huge colossal sword in a violent attack. The counterattack hits the opponent's chest, opening a deep gash and scattering sparks throughout the arena. In the past, Wolfgang talked with a veteran about demons that use mist illusions to evade attacks. His friend laughingly guaranteed that with his great weapon blessed with lightning, the beast's illusions would be totally useless. In the hero's memory, the legendary hammer smashes the smoke barrier, revealing the monster's hidden physical body. The beast was completely in shock, realizing that a mere human had managed to stop its blow so easily. It realized, terrified, that the great golden weapon possessed a sacred blessing capable of nullifying its shadow magic. The barbarian mentally thanked his old ally as he firmed his hands on the handle of his own divine weapon. Back in the present, the demon roars with fury and pain, feeling its illusory defense being nullified by the attack. Wolfgang delivers a crushing blow with the hammer, unleashing a gigantic storm of golden electricity. The impact of the electricity generates a blast of light that blinds and destroys the opponent's barriers on the spot. Golden lightning bolts crackle all over the monster's body, burning its wings and completely nullifying its unholy power. It screams desperately, realizing that this sacred electricity is undoing its armor of black flames. Wolfgang looks down on it imposingly and demands to know for the last time where the demon chief's hideout is. The injured demon decides to abandon its physical body and flees in the form of a small dark shadow across the red sky. Without the possession, the president's body collapses weakly on the asphalt, while the unholy soul vanishes into the darkness. Annoyed by the enemy's escape, the warrior smashes the ground with his electric hammer, creating more fairy fissures. The sacred lightning bolts reach the small fleeing soul, destroying the demon completely with a violent discharge. The dark smoke completely dissipates in the air, leaving only the silence of the night over the mansion's courtyard. Jinzong runs desperately to his fallen father's side on the asphalt. Crying and begging him to be okay, the barbarian grumbles in frustration, realizing he has lost his only clue to the location of the enemy's lair. He narrows his gaze, paying attention to a detail he has just noticed in the environment around that smoke. The school courtyard and the cars in the parking lot remain destroyed, revealing the gravity of that great fight. Amidst the stone fissures of the asphalt, a mysterious woman in high heels silently takes a step, surprising everyone. Suddenly, the vice president of the association appears and orders the rest of the monsters to be eliminated quickly. Several well-armed hunters in suits advance, combating the creatures that were still causing havoc in the region. The vice president walks up to Wolfgang with extreme seriousness, paying attention to every detail of the hero. Wolfgang looks at the newcomer in silence and directly asks who she is and what she wants from him. She introduces herself as Choi Un. Hyan assures him that her men will clean up the entire mess left from the confrontation. He extends her hand, offering help to get clues about the demon's secret hideout. A short time later, the group heads to the immense and imposing official headquarters of the Hunter Association. The experienced warrior calmly enters the luxurious presidential office, drawing everyone's attention. President Lee Jung-wan introduces himself friendly, extending his hand to greet the powerful barbarian. Wolfgang shakes his hand firmly, introducing himself very simply to seal the new agreement. The president is impressed by the absurd physique and the immense presence of power emanating from that warrior. Wolfgang decides to cut the friendly talk short and immediately demands to know the real reason for his summons to the headquarters. Junwan reveals with extreme seriousness that the terrible lair he seeks is located in the depths. Wolfgang narrows his eyes in surprise and repeats the enigmatic name of that feared secret abyssal region. The master explains that the monsters that avoid the sunlight created that enormous and dangerous underworld of darkness. The barbarian impatiently raises his hand and demands to know immediately where the entrance gate to that dark region is. The president recalls the fact that he easily destroyed a valuable sacred relic during his exams. He remembers that the warrior also broke through the defenses that contained the dangerous giant slime monster. Junwan points out that the hero was also present when the feared Cerberus manifested in the middle of the school. He also mentions the immense ease with which the barbarian defeated the feared and experienced masked assassin. And now, the warrior is perfectly fine after heroically facing the demon in the confrontation at the mansion. The president implies that the appearance of such a strong hunter precisely during these invasions cannot be a coincidence. He confidently opens his traditional fan, declaring that he needs to ascertain the hero's real intentions. Under the influence of his prestigious constellation, an immense floating altar materializes before everyone in the sky. The colossal and magnificent projection of Dangan appears imposingly behind the president, emanating great power. Wolfgang looks at the entity in silence and seriously questions if the master is implying he is a traitor. Junwan responds calmly and closes the fan, preparing a new test magic to assess the barbarian's strengths. An immense torrent of green wind envelops the two on top of the altar, beginning a quick combat test. Outside, the vice president adjusts her clothes, eagerly waiting for the moment the hero leaves the altar. The assistant watches everything in shock, admiring the determination of the association's leader in testing that warrior. Hai is startled when a gust of wind with green leaves invades the room, announcing the end of the test in the sky. The president is thrown violently backward. Carried by the force of the wind torrent from the altar, Junwan falls to his knees, gasping for breath with difficulty, and the vice president runs over, scared. To try to help him, Wolfgang walks imposingly and comments with disdain that for an association leader, the opponent is too weak. She shouts furiously, demanding respect, reminding him that Junwan is one of the most prestigious hunters in the country. Without caring about the complaints, Wolfgang simply repeats that he only told the truth about the opponent. Grinds her teeth in pure fury and decides to unleash all her magical power to confront the impudent hero. The magnificent and resplendent spirit of the imperial concubine appears by surprise, floating behind Yun. The assistant tries to intervene, scared, warning that starting a fight inside the headquarters would be a grave mistake. The beautiful entity activates its powerful seduction magic, releasing fragrant flower petals to dominate the hero. The spirit floats and gently kisses the hero, releasing a magical and fragrant energy over his serious face. Unhai advances victoriously, calling him an insolent human. Believing the domination magic worked successfully, she celebrates her triumph, but suddenly a terrible and crushing aura of fury begins to manifest in the place. The president screams, terrified, warning her to look behind her immediately before it's too late. Yun turns around, scared, and is faced with Wolfgang's gigantic and threatening fist advancing directly towards her. The young assistant cowers in the corner of the room, trembling with terror. At that incredible demonstration, the barbarian's punch destroys the floor under her feet, leaving her on her knees and completely trembling with pure terror. Wolfgang looks at her with a cold gaze and demands they hand over the map and all information about the underworld. In an immense abyss filled with scalding lava stands the frightening dark stone castle of the unholy underworld. In the throne room of the third sector, the leader of darkness rests imposingly, awaiting the start of the great invasion. The small smoke of Umbrax speaks with the Lord of Darkness and asks for an urgent favor to recover its strength. The sovereign curtly rejects the term and mockingly questions, since when the two were ever considered friends. The small demon gulps and sarcastically asks if the leader of darkness still holds grudges from the past. He furiously remembers when he lost his entire army and had his lands invaded by the lackey 1,000 years ago. To calm him, the creature reveals that it found the powerful barbarian hunting the demons on the earth's surface. The sovereign grips his stone throne in fury upon receiving that unexpected news about his old enemy. He decides to help, promising to ensure safe passage for Umbrax to return to its home territory. The Lord orders it to approach and promises to send it to the even deeper sectors of the feared underworld. The small monster floats happily to its ally's hand, eager for the promises of new abyssal territories. Suddenly, a frightening purple energy envelopes the creature, revealing a terrible and cruel trap right there. The Lord of Darkness activates his absolute petrification magic, turning the lackey's body into pure gray stone. He smirks with extreme malice, knowing he perfectly deceived the fool who trusted his words. He laughs mockingly, scoffing at the monster's naivety for believing in his false and treacherous promises. With disdain, he throws the stone statue far away into the shadows of that immense and frightening fortress. The piece collides violently against a pile of old bodies and bones in the dark corner of the great stone hall. The small, petrified demon is left forgotten and abandoned amidst that morbid and frightening pile of remains. An unholy smoke spreads across the stone throne as the hidden forces prepare to take their next step. The sovereign's heavy sword glows faintly in the shadows, illuminated by the magical energy that consumes the environment. The sovereign murmurs thoughtfully, acknowledging that his legendary enemy on the surface is still alive. With eyes glowing with pure hatred, he roars with fury, promising to get revenge on that cursed barbarian warrior. Back in the association's office, Wolfgang states that the hunters there are too weak to face demons. The president laments that despite having stronger hunters abroad, he is the most powerful in that Korean region. The president tries to calm the barbarian hero, arguing that the invasion was just a bizarre, isolated anomaly. But the veteran stares at the horizon through the room's large window and seriously warns that something very wrong is happening. He questions, intrigued, why the abnormal darkness and red skies haven't disappeared after the beast's defeat. Suddenly, a strong and sudden wave of tremors shakes the entire concrete building, startling the young president. Wolfgang squints as he feels the approach of an immense and crushing aura of unholy energy in the skies. Through the large window, they spot a giant pillar of red flames erupting in the middle of the city's buildings. A new and frightening giant fire demon appears, roaring in Seoul, beginning a new era of absolute panic. Another monstrous beast with bat wings and sharp teeth materializes in the neighboring city, spreading terror. In the Paju region, the beautiful and merciless abyssal succubus Astaroth appears with her dark wings under a shower of embers. The horde of fire monsters continues to march relentlessly through the deserted avenues, destroying everything. The giant bat with sharp teeth lets out a piercing roar in the skies, tearing through the clouds with extreme fury. The succubus spreads her wings and smiles sadistically, preparing to begin a true human slaughter. Junwon despairs at the arrival of new monsters, but the barbarian just confirms it coldly. Without wasting time, Wolfgang throws himself against the room's huge window, breaking the glass and leaping into the air. In mid-freefall, he draws his electric hammer, accumulating an immense amount of golden energy. He dives at high speed, tearing through the red sky like a destructive meteor towards the center of the combat. Junwon laments in horror, seeing that so many abyssal beasts have appeared in such rapid succession across the country. The hero hits the ground with violence, opening a destructive fissure in the asphalt and dissipating the dust around him. He runs with determination through the sidewalks, knowing he needs to act fast to stop the city's destruction. Junwon stares at the shattered window, unable to believe the warrior jumped from the 75th floor. Completely stunned, the two decide to run immediately after him to begin combat preparations. Meanwhile, at the prestigious temple of the Blue Dragon family, 10 minutes earlier, several students were training under the sun. The young Go Yuna trains hard with her combat spear, delivering swift blows in the air of the training courtyard. She leaps high with incredible mastery, demonstrating all her potential as the legitimate heir of the Blue Dragon. The strike from her spear destroys and breaks the large wooden training dummy with extreme ease and precision, but the young woman stares at the broken wood, frustrated, feeling she still needs much more strength to stand out. She proudly remembers the weight of her legendary surname and decides she won't let laziness take over. She recalls when everyone celebrated with astonishment the fact that she had made a pre-contract with the constellation. The constellation canceled the contract because it was disappointed, but she vows to train hard to prove her real worth. She clenches her hands tightly on the weapon's handle, promising she won't let the next great opportunity slip away. Yuna stares at her bruised and calloused hands, feeling the pain of the exhaustive martial arts training. Suddenly, her father appears, applauding proudly, and praises her excellent technique, stating she will inherit the family. The S-level leader cries with emotion upon seeing his daughter's maturity, but the young woman irritably tells him to stop the drama. She seriously ponders that she still needs to train much more to regain the constellation's support. The father becomes even more emotional at his daughter's mature words, making her completely uncomfortable with the scene. They find the strange noises outside odd, but the man tells her to focus only on her own rest. Suddenly, a huge boom shakes the temple, and both look up, startled, as they notice a strong and bizarre red light. Without hesitation, the two hunters run out hurriedly towards the large outer courtyard to see what happened. Yuna's eyes widen, extremely scared, as she comes face to face with the terrible and frightening threat invading the place. The terrible abyssal succubus Astaroth appears, floating in the skies with wings spread over the training temple's courtyard. The young female hunter stares at the creature with immediate terror, instantly recognizing the immense demonic energy emanating from it. The patriarch takes a guard stance with his legendary sword and desperately orders his daughter to run inside to safety. With a sadistic smile, the succubus demands to know the location of the legendary barbarian warrior who is hunting her allies. She recalls the direct order she received from her lord in the underworld to find the warrior and bring him back. In the past, the flame beast questioned how they would manage to track the opponent. With just that vague description, the lord explained, laughing, that he is an impetuous fool who always charges in attacking, and promised a reward for his head. In Seoul, the fire beast wanders through the city, not believing any human would be foolish enough to attack it head on. The flame beast lets out a monstrous roar, challenging anyone to try to confront its imposing power. To the monster's surprise, Wolfgang appears, diving with everything from the sky, ready to strike it with his hammer. The beast notices the approach and concludes, astonished, that the description given by the Lord about the barbarian was very accurate. The electric warrior strikes the fire monster with extreme violence, opening a huge flash of light in the middle of the street. In another area, the demon bat gloats sadistically, thinking that the glory and final reward will be his alone. It dives at high speed into the courtyard, extending its dark claws to tear apart its opponent's defenses. In the blue dragon's courtyard, Go Song-young's sacred spear is broken in half, falling shattered on the cracked ground. Fallen and injured, the S-class leader laments in horror, realizing he was so easily overcome by the beast. The succubus holds his face mockingly and demands to know where the barbarian is. But the injured master spits and refuses. Annoyed by the refusal, she begins to choke him without any mercy, making the experienced warrior scream in pain. Go Yuna comes running desperately into the courtyard, shouting that she has already made contact with the association, but she freezes in panic upon seeing her beloved father being cruelly choked by the sharp claws of that terrible beast. Her eyes widen, paralyzed with pure terror. Unable to make any quick reaction in front of that scene, the demon flashes a wide smile of pure malice, revealing its sharp canines and eyes shining sadistically. The young woman trembles in agony, trying to form the words in her dry throat from the immense pressure consuming the area. She realizes with horror that without her active constellation contract, any attempt to fight will be completely useless. Her hand trembles with pure desperation as she notices she is too weak and tired from her exhaustive training today. She stares at the ground in anguish and silently wonders if the best path wouldn't be to just wait for reinforcements. However, her father continues to suffer and lose strength before her eyes under the creature's cruel grip. His dying gaze looks at his only daughter, silently begging her not to do anything foolish there. Even coughing up liquid, the S-class hero manages to muster one last weak smile to try to reassure her. She reads his lips asking her to flee and stay safe, making her heart race with pure desperation. Tired of that scene, the succubus tightens her grip on the master's neck with lethal force, determined to end his life at once. Driven by pure desperation, Go Yuna charges with her spear in a swift attack, bathed in an intense blue flame. The demon retreats in surprise, noticing the bright blue reflection of the weapon approaching its face at the last second. The young woman lets out a roar full of fury and tears, unloading all her potential in that spear attack. The blade of blue energy collides with extreme violence, creating an immense and destructive torrent of light in the courtyard. The succubus is forced to cross her arms to contain the absurd impact of that blow that breaks her dark defenses. Go Yuna retreats, sliding masterfully on the asphalt, keeping her guard firm to protect her injured father. She positions herself imposingly in front of her progenitor, holding her great spear, ready to perish if necessary. Out of breath, The man asks her to retreat, desperately warning that the abyssal creature is too strong for her. Yuna firmly insists that she will face the abyssal succubus and sincerely apologizes to her father for everything. She remembers her internal oath to never hesitate or freeze in the face of danger in a life or death battle. The young woman decides she won't run away just out of fear and will take every chance to defend her family with honor. She tells herself to stop making excuses to give up, focusing only on saving her own father's life. Her bruised and trembling hand firms its grip on the handle of her combat spear with extreme determination and strength. Yuna clenches her fist with all her inner energy, vowing to herself that she will never fail again. Suddenly, a fantastic and colossal aura of blue lightning erupts from her body, illuminating the entire courtyard. But the constellation is impressed by her unwavering determination in the face of fear and decides to bless her again. The powerful entity proposes a new and definitive official hunter contract to re-establish their union. Yuna accepts the deal, proudly reaffirming her legitimate title as the heir of the powerful blue dragon. Under the magnificent influence of the heroic spirit of Joan of Arc, the young female hunter vows to never waver in the fight. The abyssal succubus snorts with hatred upon seeing the new contract being sealed and charges in fury to take out the clan's heir. Yuna spins her polearm with absurd mastery, unleashing bolts of fiery blue energy to defend herself. She uses her incredible sacred technique of walking on water to dodge the enemy's blows in the courtyard. The demon's eyes widen in surprise, unable to comprehend the immense speed of the opponent's steps. Yuna delivers her secret spear penetration blow, surprisingly piercing the beast's unholy armor. The impact of blue light collides squarely with the monster, shattering its flame barrier with full force. Meanwhile, in Seoul, the barbarian hero continues his violent combat, disintegrating the fire lackey's defenses. The flying demon bat boasts, shouting that the reward for the barbarian's head will be his alone. It dives from the sky, delivering a lethal fall punch against the destroyed asphalt of the large city block. Wolfgang blocks the bat's treacherous attack with extreme mastery, using the handle of his enormous divine weapon. The terrible clash of magical energies destroys several parked cars, opening deep fissures in the street. The tires of a luxurious imported car skid on the asphalt with the fury of that devastating shockwave. The vice president opens the vehicle door, perplexed, noticing the place is being devastated by new demons. The colossal fire giant roars in fury, unleashing more flames and turning the seal night into an inferno. Wolfgang focuses on his main target and leaps into the air with extreme ease, aiming to crush the monster's head. He lets out a roar of savage fury, accumulating all the power of the golden lightning in his right fist. The hammer blow discharges a gigantic electrical storm, destroying the buildings around the confrontation. The young vice president cowers in the corner, desperate, not knowing what to do in the face of that immense destruction. The energy discharge is so absurd that it knocks down light poles and shatters the entire urban scenery around them. The fire beast collapses, injured and defeated, on the asphalt, its lava armor completely cracked by the hero. She cries in despair as she sees the roof of her imported car being crushed by a huge fallen block of stone. Wolfgang lands right behind her, raising dust. While she stammers an apology nervously, the hero coldly questions her about the reason for her weakness. But she warns that 3 monsters have appeared in the country. The wind blows strong through the dark city streets as the 2 hunters plan their next strategic move. She displays a tactical map, revealing that the invasions occurred in Seoul, in neighboring Paju, and in distant Daejeon. Wolfgang praises the association's excellent information gathering capability, ensuring its usefulness in the war. He turns to her and demands that she quickly decide the best path for him to march next. In the unholy castle, the abyssal lord curses irritably at the demise of his lackey, who failed to lure the barbarian hero. The villain smiles maliciously, knowing that if he can drag the barbarian into the underworld, he will lose all his life force. Back at the temple, Go-Yuna's spear continues to unload swift blows of blue energy against the abyssal succubus. The succubus stares at her cut and burned chest, unable to understand how a mere human could cause so much damage. The young female hunter celebrates upon seeing her attack caused real damage and prepares to deliver the finishing blow. She charges forward, unleashing an even larger torrent of blue lightning that covers the entire clan courtyard. The violent explosion of electrical magic creates an immense curtain of dust and debris that flies across the destroyed courtyard. As the smoke dissipates, the damage in the courtyard reveals the gravity of that life, or death combat. Go-Yuna gasps, tired, feeling extreme exhaustion, but smiles, knowing her attack has weakened the enemy barrier. The demon spreads its wings and shouts furiously, calling the young woman an insolent worm. Determined to tear her apart without mercy, the dark, winged creature unleashes its abyssal fury and prepares to deliver a devastating counterattack. Yuna's eyes widen, completely scared, as she notices the succubus is releasing even more unholy energy. The demon opens its giant jaw, laughing sadistically, and decides to acknowledge Yuna's surprising strength. Astaroth spreads her immense wings and snorts, with fury for being forced to release her terrible evolved form. Yuna grits her teeth in pure desperation as she notices the immense and crushing, unholy aura emanating from that new form. Astaroth extends her dark claws in a free fall, delivering a lethal blow to finish off the young woman for good. Go-Yuna blocks the deadly surprise attack by crossing her spear and resisting with all her remaining energy. She grits her teeth, panting, feeling the enormous pressure of the monster's impact, trying to break her resistance. The demon laughs mockingly and breaks Yuna's spear in half, leaving the blue dragon's hair completely defenseless. Her eyes widen in absolute panic as she realizes she no longer has time to dodge the fatal attack. Suddenly, several threads of blue energy appear in the courtyard and bind the monster's body, stopping its deadly advance. The disciples of the Blue Dragon clan act with extreme precision and use their combined techniques to hold the beast. The succubus roars with hatred upon noticing she has been captured and trapped by those strange and resistant energy bonds. A new hunter in traditional white garments appears imposingly in the courtyard to provide immediate help in the rescue. He introduces himself as Kim Junhan, explaining he came to make a contract but rushed over upon feeling the demon's energy. Yuna warns that the beast is too strong for a sea level, but he guarantees his constellation grows stronger with evil. Under the influence of his constellation, his power is greatly amplified, crushing the abyssal beast's resistance. Taking advantage of the opponent's moment of weakness, Yuna advances with her spear to deliver a new and swift attack. She executes her fantastic and destructive cutting technique, unloading a colossal torrent of blue electricity. With a firm and focused gaze, she unleashes all her strength into the spear, determined to extinguish the succubus forever. The demon emits a muffled snarl of fury upon feeling the devastating weight of that direct electricity attack. The beast smiles maliciously and mocks the fact that the young woman got so close to an opponent bound by magical tethers. Suddenly, a strong explosion of red energy erupts from the creature's chest, colliding squarely with Yuna. Junhan panics, realizing his bonds won't be enough to contain the devastating counterattack. The blue dragon's hair is hit squarely by the violent explosion of red fire that destroys the clan's courtyard. Fallen on the grass, the father desperately pleads with his constellation, offering his own life in exchange for saving his daughter. The entity is moved by the sacrifice and accepts the terms of the blood contract. Raising the spear back into the air, the master extends his trembling hand and grabs the handle of his great spear, knowing this will be his last combat. A colossal and majestic blue flame envelopes the master's entire body, granting him limitless divine strength. Sanjiang stands up, overcome by a wild and immense fury, accumulating the final energy of his own soul there. With a brutal roar, he delivers a devastating attack that creates a gigantic and deadly forest of blue stakes. Yuna stares at the terrible scene, with wide eyes as she sees the immense and frightening fury released by her progenitor. The master looks at her with a sad and protective gaze, whispering his last words to ensure her safety. He advances masterfully, accumulating all his spiritual strength and blue flames to deliver the final lethal blow. The energy discharge generates a colossal torrent of blue lightning that shatters the courtyard and destroys everything around them. Junin runs beside Yuna amidst the dense curtain of black smoke and dust, asking if she's okay. The girl doesn't answer and stares at the center of the crater with her eyes wide, in absolute despair for her father. Junhan holds her firmly by the shoulder, warning that it's too dangerous to advance amidst all that rebel. But her gaze overflows with pure hatred and suffering as she understands her father sacrificed his own life for her. To everyone's total despair, the abyssal succubus emerges from the ashes, laughing mockingly and almost unharmed. The dark, winged creature advances with its sharp claws, declaring that it will exterminate everyone present at the scene. She flashes a wide smile of pure malice, revealing her fangs and eyes shining sadistically and relentlessly. But suddenly, the beast freezes in panic, noticing a swift approach coming from the sky extremely quickly. A colossal electric hammer strikes the ground with absurd violence, shattering the stone courtyard of the Blue Dragon clan. Wolfgang appears, diving with everything from the sky, enveloped in an immense storm of electricity and golden lightning. The demon decides that fighting head-on would be suicide and flees at full speed, trying to lure the barbarian into the abyss. But the experienced hero pays no mind and unloads a demolishing punch that completely shatters the ground beneath her feet. Wolfgang lands imposingly in the middle of the yellow smoke crater, introducing himself very calmly and seriously. He looks at the beast with his cold gaze and vows that he will never accept proposals or talk with filthy demons. Meanwhile, in Daejeon, the giant bat's descent area is completely destroyed and full of debris. The flying beast roars in agony as it is hit and trapped by dozens of sharp golden arrows at once. In the destroyed courtyard, the young archer collapses weakly to his knees on the asphalt, his clothes torn and injured. The S-class hunter Kim-hyun stares at the environment under the rain and warily wonders if they have finally won the fight.